Welcome back to the Infinite Monkey Cage. I'm Robin Ince.
And I'm Brian Cox.
We've been away for some time, or we've been away for no time.
Depending on your understanding of time.
Yeah, this is really, I suppose, because some physicists suggest that we may seem to experience the passing of time, but that's just our delusion, which is why more of them are being employed by parcel delivery companies. Then again, physicists also tell us that we're holograms, that in fact we are merely projections, two-dimensional images, which is insane.
It's not, it's a consequence of the thermodynamics of black holes. Bekenstein showed that black holes have an entropy, which is proportional to the...
Okay, right, anyway, so for the purposes of today, let's just presume that the passing of time has occurred, so we're sorry we haven't been about, but now we are here as well, and we've always been there in the block universe too, so don't worry about that. It's
What's
fine.
today's show about, Robin?
Today's show is about flies. Flies and bats.
What, the entropy of bats?
I always know that when it comes to us dealing with any form of biology, in some way you will turn it to being something about physics.
If you throw a bat into a black hole, like two bats, throw two bats into a black hole...
By the way, this is something you will never get past an ethics committee. If the first line is, I would like funding for throwing two bats into a black hole, that will not get passed. Anyway, look, we're going to do biology. I don't care whether you want to deal with entropy, right? And so today we are going to explore probably, I would say, the most profound question in biology, which is bats or flies, which is better?
To debate this profound question of central importance, we're joined by a bat expert, a fly expert, and a referee who will ensure fair play between the two, and they are.
Hi, my name is Dr. Eric McAllister, and I'm a senior curator of flies and fleas at the Natural History Museum. My favourite bat, actually it's just one bat, her name was Susie, and she's a Jamaican fruit bat, and I hand-reared her when I was in the Caribbean, and I hadn't realised that bats purred. And she used to sit on me and purr. And I've just lost it for flies saying that. I'm really sorry.
Hello, I'm Kate Jones. I'm Professor of Ecology and Biodiversity at University College London. And I guess if I had to say my favourite fly, I would probably go for the most dangerous animal on the planet, which is a mosquito.
It's not, you know it's not.
We'll deal with this later on.
Hello, my name is Dave Gorman. I'm a university dropout. My favourite fly is butter, and my favourite bat is wom.
And this is our panel.
I just want to clear up. So I thought mosquitoes were the most dangerous animal on the planet.
They're vectors, but a mosquito itself, she doesn't kill you. So you can't blame her. She's just being a mother, doing what she's put on the planet to do, and you're having a go at her. She's being manipulated, full stop, by everything going on. Those plasmodium, no one has a go at them.
It's not just plasmodium, is it, though?
It's all the other things that take advantage of her. She's obviously...
It's like dengue fever, chikungunya,
Yeah, I know,
which is a
there's
brilliant
few
name
things.
for a virus.
But,
A few things.
A few things. But mosquitoes do a lot of
Malaria,
good as well.
Zika.
And it's not her fault. No one cares about this. I worry about this with fleas as well, because more fleas die during the plague than humans. Again, no one cares about that. And these sort of things,
This is a fascinating thing to see entomology playing the victim card, which I've just...
Well, I worked out if you the only way a mosquito could kill you personally is to exsanguinate you, so drain you of blood. Now, it would take about 414,000 mosquitoes in one feeding event to drain you of blood enough for you to die. And we physically don't have that much skin.
Do you? Okay, I don't really understand how I'm supposed to referee this, but I'm pretty confident it's 1-0 to the bats. It was the more flies died in the Black Plague. That was it for me. I was
Fleas.
Fleas. Yeah.
Actually, I was interested.
I can't care for fleas.
I'm sure last time you were on, you were curator of flies at the National...
No, I'm flies and fleas.
It's a promotion.
Well,
I like the idea that you go, well, it started off as an infestation, but then we thought we could turn it into a promotion instead.
fleas, they're very closely related to flies. Okay, they've got the issue of no wings, but a lot of flies have no wings, so that's fine.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's start the show, actually, because I can see now our producer's gone, well, none of this is what we were meant to be talking about. But no, I love it. It's my fault. Let's start with you, Kate, on actually the first kind of, well, the only round, I suppose. We're going to give you 1 minute. So we've stolen a bell from Sue Perkins that she likes to use for just a minute.
There's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, it is.
Can I just interject here? Because it's not really an unfair question, is it? Because you're a professor at UCL and you're here because you're an expert on bats. And all he said is, can you give us a minute on bats?
Fine.
So,
You can do that, fine. I'm just trying to get the parameters of the competition, that was all.
Professor, please give us a minute. In a Reithian manner, educate, inform and entertain on the subject of bats.
Right, bats are awesome. There are over 1,400 species. They're the largest group of mammals on the planet, apart from rodents, and they're found all over the world, apart from the poles. There's a huge range in sizes, from the bumblebee bat, which is the size of a bumblebee, 2 grams, to the false vampire bat, or the Indian flying fox, which is 1.5 kilograms. They're important pollinators and seed dispersers. Over 500 species are pollinated by bats and rely on bats. That includes mangoes, durians, avocados, and of course, agave plants, which make tequila for margaritas. They're an important controller of insect populations. In the US alone, the services provided by bats save over 23 billion a year in pesticides not being applied. They're the only mammal capable of powered flight. They include the fastest flying mammal in the world, flying animal in the world, 160 kilometers an hour. The longest lived animal for their size, 41 years.
No, it's all right, because it's not that game. You're allowed to go on a little bit longer.
There were like 2 more things I needed to say.
Yeah, that's fine.
They're good at repairing DNA. They've got sophisticated use of echolocation, and their squeaks are louder than a rock concert, 140 decibels, which is 15 decibels higher than our pain threshold.
I just want to object to one thing, though, because they're not the only mammals capable of powered flight, are they?
No, they are.
Because Neil Armstrong...
By the way, if you've ever wondered, he's really annoying at pub quizzes.
Okay, they're the only non-human animal
capable of powered flight.
You say they repair DNA?
Yeah.
I mean, genuinely, is there some practical purpose that we can take from their repairing of DNA?
Yeah, there is actually. So bats are these amazing flyers, and it means that you have to have a really high metabolism in order to power that flight, because it's really costly. And that puts enormous metabolic pressure on cells, and it means that they get oxidative damage quite a lot. And so oxidative damage damages DNA, and they've evolved to kind of cope with that and repair DNA. So they're really, really good at repairing DNA, and those are things which cause cancer, for example. So bats hardly ever get cancer, and also they're just really good at fighting infections. So we could actually learn from them about how they deal with horrible diseases.
And yet, bats and horrible diseases. There's a sort of elephant in the room here right now, isn't there? We're casting a shadow over the last few years of our lives. If you get bitten by a bat, you don't suddenly get a cure for cancer. You get a bloody pandemic.
Okay, well, can I just address that straight on, I think, really. It needs to be addressed. So the reason for this COVID pandemic is about our actions rather than any particular animal. Like demonising a particular wildlife species is never going to be helpful, because it's how we've transformed the landscapes, which have made us come into contact with different animals and in different situations than ever before. So all species have their own microbes and own pathogens, you know, every single one of us in this room and every species on the planet. But it's just how we've changed that transmission dynamics means that we're creating these really unhealthy landscapes for us and for wildlife. And it means that those microbes can have a bigger chance of getting into the human population.
Erica, let's move on to you now. So, as you know, it's slightly changed now. It's what is better, bats or Neil Armstrong? And you have 1 minute on Neil Armstrong, starting now.
Well, actually, the first animal in space was a fly. So I just say that in 1947, and that's the nice way to start. Now, there's a lot of them, and I know a lot of people won't like the fact there's a lot of them, but we do need them. There's 165,000 described species so far on the planet. There's over 7,000 alone in the UK. So they absolutely dominate. And we need them to dominate because they're so important when it comes to all ecosystem services. So you would often come across a fly when they're maybe, I don't know, rolling around feces, and you might not like that. But just imagine if they weren't rolling around in feces. You'll be swimming in a quagmire of it with a long dead relative floating along beside you. So they're really important recyclers of the planet. They're really important pollinators. Yes, you have tequila, but I'll give you chocolate. And more people like chocolate, and that's because of the flies. They're really important as predators, and they're not just really good predators. Some of them are completely amazing, because a lot of them are venomous. And so, oh my God, I haven't even started!
See, that's what happened to me.
I say that you were even better this time in putting people off their tea, in the fact that not only did you mention dead bodies and excrement, but then you went straight into chocolate. So you made the link so clear.
I don't like chocolate. Right, I'm just going to say silk production, bioluminescence, smart needles, and cryo-freezing. They can desiccate and they can go into liquid nitrogen. Back off.
So just the liquid nitrogen thing then. Just run us through that.
Right, it's a sleeping chironomid, and actually NASA are looking at the sleeping chironomid because it does all sorts of crazy stuff. And I'm a bit nervous because Brian's sitting there, and I'm like, oh, I'm venturing too far out of my territory here. But this chironomid, it's called a sleeping chironomid. It lives in the desert. And when it lives, obviously, these are non-biting midges, and the larvae live in little water bodies, and water bodies desiccate quite quickly. So they make a little cocoon out of mud, and they stand up in it, this little maggot goes, ugh, and then they basically just desiccate, and they desiccate 90% of their body. That's it, 3% is liquid left. And therefore, they are able to survive extreme. And in a lab, they lived for 17 years like this. Now, what lovely scientists are doing are being really horrible. They try them out in all sorts of different things. So they've boiled these. It gets worse. So they boiled them at 100 degrees for 5 minutes, and then they've taken them out and put them in normal water, like room temperature, and they gradually rehydrate, and they're fine. And they carry on to adulthood. So they thought, OK, let's try something more. So they've boiled them at 5 minutes at 200 degrees, and they've survived. They have taken them down to minus 190 degrees for a couple of minutes, and again, they've survived. They've taken them to minus 260 degrees, and they've survived. They've put in them 100% ethanol, and they've survived for 7 days. They have thrown radiation at them, and they can, is it grays? Yep, they can survive 7,000 grays. So, I mean, they're a bit weird afterwards. That definitely is. But these little creatures can do all sorts of amazing things.
What do you mean they're a bit
asleep.
weird afterwards? You've got to run me through that.
Well,
Are all these experiments hosted by Ant and Dec?
Well, they don't. These ones haven't made it to adulthood, so they will survive a couple of weeks. But the fact that they have been revived, because they go through what's called cryptobiosis. It's not like a hibernation. They don't metabolize one bit.
It's interesting. So essentially, you said they can survive for, well, almost ever in this state. One reason is because all the water comes out. And I suppose that's why you can freeze them, because the thing that destroys organisms when they freeze is the expansion of the water in the cells, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I understand that. But in terms of boiling or subjecting to very high temperatures, you would think that the proteins and the structure of the thing would break down. But I suppose the question is why? Because obviously, from an evolutionary perspective, is it just a byproduct of the fact that these things can be frozen at normal temperatures, but it happens that you can take the thing down to minus 170?
I'm guessing that. I'm guessing they didn't think.
Where do they live, Erica? Do they get desiccated
Not
quite
to that
often?
extreme. Yeah, they will get desiccated a lot, but they are not going to be subjected to boiling temperatures like that. I mean, the water bodies will get very hot, but they're not boiling lakes.
When they're not having these awful experiments of withstanding torture, in their natural habitat,
Yeah,
what do they actually do?
everything.
Because the reason I want to survive is because I want to watch Homes Under the Hammer tomorrow. I want to read a book. I want to go for a bike ride. I want to hang out with my wife and my child. That's why I like surviving. But these things, I sort of get the impression they're really good at surviving, but then they don't take advantage of that.
Okay, they
I like
probably
the idea that the fly's failure to enjoy homes under the hammer may well be its reason to be destroyed from the planet.
I just want to know what they do.
They have a lot of sex. They have a huge. Their fertility rate is one of the reasons they're the model organism on the planet. Animals. So Drosophila, why Drosophila became such an amazing lab animal was because basically the turnover, they were small, they ate basically bananas, it was great, and they were very reproductive. So they were able to do very complicated experiments, when previously, when they were looking at genetics, they were using hares. And that's just a long time of waiting.
What range of lifespans do flies have? What's the shortest lived and the longest lived?
Well, the shortest lived for the whole lifespan, this is what we're going to talk about, the whole lifespan is a couple of weeks. But there are some adults that only survive for 2 hours. The male survives for 2.5 hours and the female is half an hour as an adult. It's rapid.
That has made and they go through this experiment and survive into adulthood seem less impressive.
But bats, on the other hand, live an inordinately long time, don't they?
Yeah, they're the longest lived mammal. If you do a whole graph of like lifespan along the bottom and size, they're outliers because they're kind of similar sized mammal to a bat. Say would be like a mouse, which would be living 18 months or something, and the similar sized bat would be 41 years or something like that. So it's because of this kind of DNA repair mechanism that they have, we think.
So 40 years?
That's the record, 41.
I just wonder if they could have lived even longer, and then one scientist went, it's lived till 41. I wonder if it survives in liquid nitrogen. Oh, no, it doesn't. There we go.
I find it interesting, though, looking from an evolutionary perspective, it's interesting that you could ask the question, why only live half an hour as an adult? Or you could ask the question, what advantage does a bat have for living 40 years? I suppose you're suggesting it's a side effect of its ability to repair itself.
And it's also a side effect of the fact that it has very little mortality, so that it tries to optimize. Life is a huge optimization game, right? So that you grow as large as you can be, and then you start reproducing, evolutionary in evolutionary terms. And so bats have very low mortality. They take ages to kind of get to adult size compared to a similarly sized mammal like a rat or a mouse. So they just like live in the slow lane. They give birth to one baby each. They have a low reproductive turnover, which makes them more vulnerable to things that might happen, like deforestation or disturbing a roost, because they have such a slow reproductive strategy. They kind of totally really focus on living slowly, and so if anything disrupts that, it's a big problem for them.
That's interesting because there's a lot of flies that only give birth to one young at a time, and these flies are found on bats.
Are they?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, that's why I met Susie, because we were checking out for flies on bats.
Who's Susie?
My little fruit bat from
Oh,
earlier.
I see.
And honestly, you don't pay any
I know,
attention.
I do.
But
It was such a pity because suddenly there was common ground.
I know,
and then
we had it, and she blew
it's
it.
the perfect second reel of the movie. Hey, they're getting on. Oh no, in this Mills and Boon romance, they've fallen apart again.
these are wingless flies living on bats.
And they give birth to one.
They give birth to live young, so the flies themselves get pregnant. Yeah, they've got internal lactating glands.
What?
Tits on the inside. And they will nurture. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that for Radio 4.
You have?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Also, if that is not going to be sampled within the next year by someone, a tits on the inside is undoubtedly... It
Obviously-
might not be a Christmas number 1, but I could see it being an Easter number 5.
Yeah.
No. So the life cycle of the bat fly, what's it called, by the way?
There's two... well, we're arguing because we may sync them into one family, but there's the Nycteriobids and the Streblidae, and they... most of them, if they've got wings, they won't have them for long. Some... Arguably the weirdest fly I think I know of one is that when she gets pregnant, she then sticks her head in the side of the bat and she rips off her wings and her legs, and then she basically invaginates her abdomen over her body. So she looks like an inverted pear. So it just looks really weird. But yeah, and she would then give birth to maybe 4 or 5 young.
I love the fact, again, someone at home, they've given up on their chocolate, they went, I'll just have this pear. Oh, this is getting ridiculous. How does she always know?
These flies, their offspring is like 40% of their body weight.
That's true for bats too, actually.
We have common ground.
We've got to write a paper on this.
There's a word, invaginate. I mean, that's not just tits on the inside, that's everything on the inside then, isn't it?
Yeah, imagine pulling your butt cheeks so far apart and then wrapping them over your head.
It's a really interesting period of a show, isn't it, where you go, does this one just become the legendary one that never went out? This is, and it seems to be... But I'm fascinated... Well, actually, just in terms of these things like the loss of wings, the idea that there is something that you develop that you will use very, very briefly, it will then be destroyed because its function has been reached.
Yeah, loads of flies do it. There's a group of a family of flies called phorids, the horrid phorids, because they're quite difficult to identify. But there's the ones that live in coffins, so they're very important for forensics. So if you were to bury a body, please, I don't want to know about it if you do, when they talk about them being 6 foot under, because these flies, the males will lift the females up. Sometimes they don't have wings to start with at all. But if they do, they kind of throw them down, and the female then rips her wings off to enable her to bury down to the coffin, to the corpse, to lay her eggs on it. Which is, I mean, how that starts in the first place, the evolutionary advantage of, like, those sorts of things happen, and I just think are quite fascinating.
There are some bats which haven't lost the ability to fly, but they do like hopping and running on the ground.
See, that's what I wanted to ask you about. So that I'm fascinated with things like the development of, well, at what point we see the ancestor of the bat, that there is the mammal that flies, because there are so few mammals that do fly.
Yeah, it's a bit of a contested issue, actually. We think it's probably an animal that was arboreal in a tree, was kind of leaping off those trees to start to fly, you know, and spreading wings, and then that evolved into flight. But the flight in bats is really different to birds. Bats are called chiroptera, so which means hand wing, and it means that they have expanded their hand basically into a wing. But some of the wings have evolved into, they use them to jump. So the vampire bat, there's only three bats which drink blood out of 1,400, just saying.
I mean, I went to a school with 1,400 kids in it, and someone said, only 3 of them drink blood. We'd think that was pretty bad odds.
So, see what you're saying there. But they do. So vampire bats can leap really high into the air from a standing start because they need to get onto the things that they're drinking, like cattle, for example.
But this is great. But like hoverflies can do all of this, but better. You know, they do jump jet. In fact, there's lots of people at Imperial right now looking at hoverflies for jump jet technology because they're amazing at their vertical lifts. They can like stay midair, they can yaw, they can roll, they can fly upside down, they can do all of these. Huge migrations as well. There's a fly that flies over from Africa to the UK. So this little thing, not a big flappy thing, little thing. People forget how amazing these wild animals flying around your living room really are.
Well, that's, I mean, you know, at the beginning we were talking a little bit about the fact that both of you are dealing with, you know, creatures that are vilified and have been vilified in popular culture and generally as well. Do you feel you're beginning to win the war to stop people swatting them away?
No. I hope so. And I just, the fact that it's really hard to swat them. Have people not thought about this? So the processes, they've got such fast neurological pathways. So they see everything. They're just their eye facets, you know. They may only have 5,000 eye facets, which are like the ommatidia. So dragonflies have 36,000. Well, bats have 2 eyes? 2, just saying. But, you know, you've got all this, but within it, how they differ from the other insects is that their photocell, which in the other insects is 8 fused together, the flies have got them all separated again. So they are seeing all these multiple angles.
Then why can't it find the open window?
No, there's a difference. There is a difference. Right,
That's a brilliant question.
No, but I have been asked this a lot. I have been. Now, they see in UVA, UVB, okay? So that is refracted by the glass anyway. So they've got weird things going on. Plus, loads of things land on the window. They taste with their feet. So they're tasting all sorts of strange things going, oh, you know what, your house is filthy. I don't know you personally, but your house is filthy. And they can smell it from far, far away. So they're in there. Why would they go outside when they've got a warm, like very nice protective environment. They don't register home ownership. They don't get it.
That's one of my issues with them.
It's one of the reasons you're always watching Homes Under the Hammer. You can't live in this smelly old house full of flies. I've got to find somewhere else to live. I mean, you mentioned echolocation, and that is, Erica, went, they've only got 2 eyes. But I remember someone once saying, how do bats get around? They basically just shout at things to find out where they are, which is such a beautiful, description. Oh, there's something over there. So can you run us through a little bit about how that works then, and what we know of how it works?
Yeah, I mean, it is really fascinating that they've evolved this capacity to, emit sounds and then bounce those sounds off objects and then understand how the frequencies are changing as they come back and interpret that and then turn that into an actual shape or where they are or what the object is. And in fact, that kind of abilities can be trained into humans, and some people that are visually impaired have been using that kind of technology and actually training themselves with clickers and to click and interpreting the echoes when they get back. And there's some really fascinating studies where somebody who was visually impaired actually saw the stairs from their house for the first time after training their brain into having this input of sound rather than vision, which is really fascinating. When you think about how that actually works in your brain, you can actually, because the brain is actually in a case, in a darkened case, right? So it's just getting input of light from your eyes, but that's the same kind of input you're getting from these echoes as they're bouncing into your ears instead. So I think it's a really fascinating area, and there's like huge arms races going on between insects and bats. So some moths can hear...
Sneaky moths.
Yeah, so some of them can hear bats actually echolocating and will take evasive action. So they'll fold up their wings and drop out the sky for a bit just to get out of the range. Or bats can do a countermeasure where they can go silent for a bit just to eavesdrop on the moths. Or some moths will jam bats. So they make a jamming signal. And so the bat's like, whoa, what's happening? And can't spot them. And it's not just insects either, like plants do it. So some plants have evolved leaf shapes which are parabolic. And so when the bat is coming in to pollinate, it kind of says, I'm here, because it's got this lovely kind of shaped leaf which sends the signal back out to the bats so they can, it's like, waving flags at the airport, like, park here, come in.
I did just want to explore very briefly, you mentioned pollination there. We've talked about the threats from insects, mosquitoes, bats, and so on. What would you say to people who think, particularly, let's talk about mosquitoes, for example. It seems as if it would be a good idea to remove mosquito, just very naively, given that malaria is probably the greatest killer of humans. So why is it that we shouldn't consider controlling species that are dangerous to us?
We can both answer this. Okay, so there's 3,500 described species of mosquito, and they occur all over the planet in cold regions, Arctic, in the warm regions that we know. And of those 3,500, 150 of those species are important vectors for these diseases. Maybe about 20 of them are the ones that really do all the damage. But that's only the females that are the vectors. The females and the males are also pollinators. Massively. The males will never blood feed, so they go around pollinating. Now, we don't know. We give these names to these mosquitoes. We have spent so little time understanding their ecology. Now, going back to the Arctic, there's 4,000 described species there of insect, 2,000 of them are flies, and quite a lot of them are the mosquitoes. They're really important Arctic pollinators. They exist in regions we don't know. Now, their larvae, there's a lot of them, and they're really good food. So if you suddenly get rid of a food source for a lot of the higher animals to feed on, you're suddenly having a massive knock-on effect. So we do not know the unintended consequences of eradicating a species. They have looked in areas where cities in the Congo Basin have gradually hit forests. I mean, we've seen what happens when we do that. And the malaria has jumped into these new species. So even if we did eradicate these mosquitoes, what's to say something isn't going to come in and fill that vacuum?
I mean, I would just add, I would just completely agree with Erica. I know, shocking, completely agree with you. I think that there are loads of unintended consequences for doing such a thing. There was a mass spraying of DDT to control crop pests and mosquitoes in the States in the 50s, and that kind of led to a huge environmental problem where DDT went up the food chain into birds and caused a huge devastation in populations. And that led to the environmental movement, because that was Rachel Carson who said, this is a silent spring. She wrote a book called Silent Spring. But, these are really hard questions, because controlling populations of mosquitoes does help people survive.
Yeah, but when we've used smart technology, when we've used different technology, that's always backfired. The best things that have helped are bed nets and things like that. When we've understand the ecology, we've said, hold on, these are night feeders. Let's give them that. Let's give protective clothing. We create a barrier. We break that rather than trying to use this kind of massive hand that's going to slam down on populations.
Can't you also control it by drinking a lot of gin and tonic?
I'm trying.
It does work though, doesn't it?
Yes. Actually, there was a beer created when there was a black fly outbreak in Dorset in the 60s. But it was really strong and it had ginger in, and I guess it works if you have enough. You just don't care.
And in terms of bats, clearly, well, Dave mentioned it, of course, COVID came into humans from bats.
We think.
We think. So in terms of that, is the answer really to limit our interaction as much as possible? Is that the way we're going to prevent future coronaviruses or whatever it may be, jumping species?
Well, I think the biggest issue is that when we degrade landscapes, when we chop forests down and turn them into something else, you change the communities of animals that are present in those landscapes. So this could be insects too, right? And, you have these animals which can survive in these degraded spaces. They invest less in immunity, they reproduce faster because they're kind of more stressed, they have to survive. And it tends to be those species which host these pathogens. And we can show globally that this is what's happening to our environments, which they're becoming more degraded. The communities of animals in them are changing because they're trying to survive, and they're more likely to be hosts of these pathogens, which are, jump into humans. So the answer is to restore these habitats and make sure that we're living in an environment which is healthy, not just for them, but for us as well.
Yeah. We need to kind of get the balance back. We have one planet. And if we carry on at the rate we're doing, we're not going to do you're seeing it already with species loss of insects and things like that. And it's only taken people now to realise why insects are important. So it was like, save your panda. At the end of the day, no offence to bats, because I do like bats, you can get rid of all mammals and it won't have any consequence to the planet. Some bats can stay, okay, because of tequila. I'll do that. Right, those can stay. But if you get rid of insects, we would just fall apart within months. And that's, I want to live with them. I think they're very nice.
So we've got to the point now. I suppose the reason for doing the show was the ultimate message: kill all mammals. And
I did want to ask one question. We had a question. We thought, often when we speak to scientists, we speak about a scientist, for example, who studies Mars, and they'd want to go to Mars. Brian Blessed, famously.
Wants to go to Mars, you little bastard.
Yes. So we thought we'd ask her. So. We talked about the way that bats experience the world, insects experience the world, and we thought it'd be quite a bizarre question to ask you both. If you could, so Erica first, if you could experience the world like any particular insect, it's almost like a David Cronenberg film. If you could become a particular insect, which insect would you become? Which fly would you like to be?
And this is eventually going to be like a version of Stars in Your Eyes. Tonight, Matthew, I'm going to be Drosophila.
I can't decide. It's either a robber fly or a bee fly. Robber flies, because they're just the most amazing aerial predators out. They're highly venomous. They've got supreme sight. Their flying abilities are amazing. They're hard. They look amazing. But bee flies, they're really naughty, but really good pollinators. Their larvae eat baby bees, and she's basically got a machine gun. Well, she has a little bum bag, which I think, I've got a COVID bottom, as I describe it. And I quite like, just laying eggs mid-air and just hurling them around the garden. I think that's my level of...
And Kate, what's the bat with the lifestyle you most envy?
I think it might be the hammer-headed fruit bat. So I don't know whether you want to have a look at this online later, but it's got an enormous head.
This is the one that looks like a dog.
Yeah, and they have this enormous kind of nose that they go around honking. honestly, they honk, honk, honk like this. And so when the males are attracting females, they gather all into a little a lek, which is called a lek, and the males are performing for these females that come and go, oh, yeah, amazing. And they do this honking, and it's just incredible, absolutely incredible. What a lifestyle to go around with this massive...
I just love the image now of basically you two with your different life. You're down there honking, she's chucking eggs around and eating bees. It's magnificent.
Dave, if you...
So, Dave, what have you decided?
I think the winner is the plant that's parabolic. I think that's better than both bats and flies. I think that's amazing. I think it's all interesting, but when you say, you shouldn't have a go at the mosquito, it's just doing what it was put on this earth to do, I think a human instinct is to try and swat a fly. So we're just doing what we were put on this earth to do.
Well, I think, I think we'll throw this to the audience, by the way. Let's just have a quick vote in terms of we're going to do bats and flies.
Yeah, well, I don't know how we're going to do it. All right, put your hands up if you support the bats.
That's
And-
two votes
See, I've got
here.
to say, Brian, for radio, I'd have gone with them making a noise.
You actually, for once, have a point. Which noise shall we have the audience make?
Honking.
A honk. If you support the bats, honk. Which bat was it?
Hammer-headed fruit bat.
Honk like a hammer-headed fruit bat. And if you support the flies, then what, Erica? What's the fly noise? That's
Throw an egg at them.
I guess.
Oh, it was 50-50.
a draw.
Exactly balanced. Flies and bats. The most successful vote given to the public that's happened in the last 10 years. We asked the audience a question as well. We wanted to know, would you rather be a bat or a fly? And we would like them to explain why. I think you've got the bat ones, haven't you?
yes, and Dave's got some as well.
Right, and I think
pass
I've got
some fly ones over
those
as
are
well.
those are the fly ones.
Okay.
The first one is from Tim. A fly. Batman is no superhero, just a rich bloke who thinks he's tough. The Fly, on the other hand, starring Jeff Goldblum, is a clear winner, and I totally agree with you. By the way, Erica, just out of interest, how scientifically accurate do you think the metamorphosis of Jeff Goldblum from Brundle to Brundlefly is?
Well, actually, I've been asked to review it on that very basis, and this is what I get paid to do. No, honestly, this is so the feeding habits changed remarkably, absolutely brilliant. His sexual appetite increased enormously, totally on. It's only at the end when he starts dropping bits off and becoming weird, that's when I kind of lost it, because he would have emerged as a fully formed fly, as it were, from that stage, because he's an adult. So, I mean, the behaviour, the appetite, his appetites increased, his drive, etc. That's really good. Morphologically, it was a bit poor.
And Kate, can you review Batman?
Well, I mean, the echolocation didn't really feature until far on the movie. So, I mean, I do like all the Batmen. They are pretty nice.
But they're not very bat-based. I mean, the Fly is pretty fly-based. Batman has a belt. Now, of all the things that we've looked
It's got a
at...
little visor as well, a bat-shaped visor.
Right.
Okay.
That's not to be honest, I feel let down for you. I'm not attacking the bats. It just feels like it's a man with a belt.
I'm going to bring this
Right, we better move on.
I
Sorry,
want
it's
to
my fault.
bring this back to serious science. So Chris Sinclair has said he'd rather be a bat than a fly because nobody ever got their foreskin jammed in a bat.
We had to explain that to the producer. I don't get this one at all. Well, and then we explained
I
puns,
think
which is
you did-
amazing as a producer on Radio 4 to have come across a pun for the first time after 25 years.
But I
don't
think
know
you
how that
explained that
happened.
some flies do get things jammed in bats, didn't you?
Yeah.
You did the pear-shaped ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Barry, you've made a fundamental error here, Barry. He says a fruit bat, it has a much healthier diet than excrement, to which I think the obvious rejoinder is, well, what about a fruit fly?
Yeah.
You haven't helped solve the debate, have you? You've just fired it up again, Barry.
Some of us will be reading these as jokes, others will merely turn this into a moment of pedantry or footnotes.
Kath said, I'd like to be a bat because my husband says that I have the hearing of one.
Someone with the unlikely name of Max Power says, bat, Because flies tend to get swallowed by old ladies.
And then Sandy says, tough call, but it's a bat by a squeak.
Well, thank you very much for your jokes and your answers. And thank you very much to our panel, Erica McAllister, Kate Jones and Dave Gorman.
Now, next week, we're moving from the skies to the seas and exploring the deep oceans.
We'll be asking, what's better, a fish or a sponge?
No, we won't. That's cheap. And that's the line from Whitnell and I, isn't it?
No, Whitnell and I is, are you a sponge or a stone? I'd rather be a sea squirt, because they eat their own brains.
Why?
They do. Sea squirts eat their own
But
brains.
why do you want to be one?
Because mine keeps making noises and I don't like it. So I'm going to eat my brain and watch Gogglebox or Holmes Under the Hammer and just relax.
Well, you can't watch. If you've eaten your brain, you can't even watch Home for the Hammer.
Oh, yeah, you can. You can. Anyway, so that's what we're going to be looking at.
Goodbye.
Shark or seahorse?
In the infinite monkey cage. Turned out nice again.
Hello, I'm Brian Cox. Well, we can all dream, can't we?
And I'm Robin Ince. Oh, God.
And we can also nightmare as well. Welcome to the Infinite Monkey Cage. And actually, before, there was a lovely thing. I went to a barbecue just after the coronation with a bunch of strangers, and quite often people have come up to me and asked me things about Brian. And this man came up to me and he went, "Oh, hello, I've been wanting to talk to you. You're the man that supports that hypnotist." I've had so many people say, "Oh, you work with that astrologer," right? But the idea that you actually go on television and kind of go, "Now listen, the universe is 13.7 billion years old, and now eat this onion thinking it's an apple." Absolutely charming. And that is what you sound like.
I was going to say. As this episode of Monkey Cage will be broadcast at the height of the English summer, we'll be addressing the most summary subject we could think of.
Waving your hands about wildly and ineffectively as a wasp encircles your cucumber sandwich before it dies in a melancholy manner in a glass of Pimm's.
Isn't that a bit Evil in War?
A little bit Bennett too. A touch of both. Anyway, so actually, because it's Radio 4, that's okay for the Radio 4 version, but we also go out on BBC Sounds. So our producer has written what she considers to be the upbeat youth version of the same line. So after Brian says the most summary subject we could think of, I have to say, raving to the beats as a wasp encircles your vegan sausage roll and then drowns in your Alcopop. Yeah. Which is apparently how young people speak, according to our producer, who went on the young persons course for BBC Radio.
Today we'll be exploring the hidden worlds of bees and wasps, their surprising intelligence, intricate social structures, and the vital contributions they make to the wider natural world. Joining us, we have a professor of bees, a professor of wasps, and someone who is neither a professor of bees or wasps. And they are.
Oh, starting with me, sorry.
He's falling asleep, yeah.
My name's Dave Goulson. I am based at the University of Sussex, and I spent the last 30 years studying bumblebees, my favourite subject, and my worst sting. Slightly embarrassing backstory to this, but I'll cut to the important bit. I was in the lab one day, and I managed to suck a bumblebee into my mouth, which, of course, you can hardly blame her, stung me on the inside of my bottom lip, which immediately ballooned. And I spent the rest of the day with my students all ridiculing me and unable to eat anything because I just found it all sort of fell out. But anyway, I wouldn't recommend it.
No, I really need to know a bit of the backstory.
Me too. Me too. Thank you, Brian.
Whilst doing what?
Okay. So there's a little gadget that entomologists use called a pooter. They use for sucking up small insects. So it consists of a little jar and two tubes going through a bung in the top. And you point one of the tubes at a small insect and you stick the other tube in your mouth and you suck. And the little insect flies into the jar. That's the idea. Anyway, I needed to move some bumblebees from one place to another and sort them out. So I decided to make a giant-sized pooter, a bumblebee-sized pooter, with a big jam jar and two big tubes. You can kind of see where this is going. And it worked. You know, I pointed at a bee, sucked hard, and whoosh, it shot into the jar. So I sucked up a couple more. But of course, I'd forgotten a crucial part of the design, which is that the tube that goes into your mouth has to have a little bit of netting on the bottom end of it. Otherwise, there's nothing to stop the things shooting into the jar and then shooting straight up into your lungs or mouth, which is exactly what happened. So it was entirely my own fault.
That's a hard act to follow. So I'm Serian Sumner. I am a Professor of Behavioural Ecology at University College London, and I've spent not quite as long as Dave studying insects, but I study wasps mostly. My sting of stings was in Panama in 2006. And it has stuck in my head because, so I used to study these quite big paper wasps. They're about 2 centimetres long, big stings. So my student was under the house, where all the house on stilts and the wasp's nest under the house. And he was doing his things, we were painting wasps and taking them off the nests and doing stuff. He must have angered the wasps in some way. I was standing, like 10 metres away, and the wasps came flying out, and he went running off, because even when you're a wasp researcher, if the wasps come, you run. And so he came running out, and I thought, God, what's he done this time? Anyway, this wasp clearly saw the person running away and thought, I'm not going to chase them. And they saw me standing statically, just watching, and it came right up here and it stung me on the eyebrow. And then the next week, I looked like some sort of elephant woman. I just had this enormous face, and it's not a good look for someone who studies wasps.
Unprofessional.
Really unprofessional. So that was the sting of stings.
I love Sting of Stings. It sounds like an all-wasp remake of the life of Jesus.
Hello, I'm Catherine Bohart. I do stand-up comedy. And I suppose the most memorable sting I've ever had, to be honest with you, it happened on my way in here. At the reception here in this building, they will always take your photo without warning and without even saying smile. And then they hand you the photo. In my case, a sort of shiny potato. And you just have to live with that. And so I'm still smarting.
And this is our panel. Right, because it's wasps versus bees, we need to find out how much your opinion changes throughout this show. So for the audience that are sat here, we need to find out who's pro-wasp and who's pro-bee. What we're going to do is release some wasps into the world. So just first of all, by a cheer, who here is going to vote at this early stage for wasps? I told you it'd be 7. And who here is going to vote for bees? What a mainstream crowd. So, there's a lot of work to go on here. We've got an idea. It's just an idea we just came up with. We thought of an idea where you could talk for maybe 70 seconds without repetition or deviation.
It's a copyright issue
for legal
that
reasons.
we had.
And first of all, I'm going to start with you, Dave, in terms of 70 seconds on bees for our brilliant original idea, just a 70 seconds. So for 70 seconds, give your argument for the bee.
Okay, they are much cuter than wasps. They are furry and colourful and cuddly. They are much more useful to us directly. Bees are the main pollinators of a huge number of crops, about 3/4 of the things we eat. So things like tomatoes we wouldn't have without bees. But also, I love bees because they're really interesting. They're clever. They're the intellectual giants, I would argue, of the insect world. They are capable of amazing feats of communication and navigation and learning. You can even teach bees to play football. And if that isn't enough, then I'll finish off with the hairy-footed flower bee, which is my favourite bee. They're a solitary bee that flies around our gardens in the spring. And it's called the hairy-footed flower bee because the male has his middle feet have big tufts of hairs on them, and when they're mating, he gently strokes the face of the female with his hairy feet. Don't try it at home. And she seems to really like it. How sweet is that? Bees.
Well, Serian?
Wasps. Well, I'll just start with the fact that if it hadn't been for wasps, there would be no bees. Bees are simply vegetarian wasps. They are wasps that have forgotten how to hunt. One. There are over 100,000 species of wasps. How many species of bees are there? A mere 22,000. Wasps are diverse by every measure. We have enormous wasps that have 12-centimetre wingspan. They can fly 40 kilometres an hour. They can turn other insects and arthropods into zombies. They are superb assassins. They are medicine cabinets. Inside their venom, they're able to paralyze insects. They produce antibiotics, antivirals. What else can I say?
That's all right, your time's up.
I haven't even said the really important thing.
Oh, go on then.
Sorry, they are nature's pest controllers. So you might love bees because they pollinate, but wasps pollinate too. And on top of that, they regulate all the other insect populations. They eat the pesky bees and the pesky flies and the caterpillars and the aphids and the spiders and the cockroaches and everything else that you hate.
I was very impressed. So, Catherine, there, you heard the opening arguments. You are very much the vessel of the audience's opinion. How do you feel at this current time on wasps?
What I'm hearing is that bees are creeps and wasps are psychopaths. But I'll remain neutral for now.
Dave, actually, Serian mentioned the idea that wasps predate bees. So could you speak?
It's not an idea, Brian. It's
well, ideas.
You've got to remember,
phraseology.
He is a physicist, so everything that's not atoms is, well, it's a story, isn't it?
Serian mentioned the fact that wasps predate bees. Could you talk about the evolutionary history of
insects as a whole are incredibly ancient, go back about 480 million years, so they're amongst the oldest creatures on the planet. So that's before there were dinosaurs, there were wasps. Bees came along about 120 million years ago, so still quite a while ago. But that's why there are fewer bees than there are wasps, because the wasps have had longer to speciate and fill all these weird and wonderful niches.
If you saw a new species of bee or wasp, new to science, how do you decide whether it's a bee or a wasp, given that they're so closely related?
Well,
What's the
clearly
difference?
you invite it to a picnic and see if it annoys you or not.
What's the key difference?
So wasps have a wasp waist. They have a constricted wasp waist. Bees tend to be a bit fatter, and they tend to be hairier. And also, a lot of bees have pollen sacs on their back legs where they carry the pollen, and wasps don't have that.
So basically, bees are wasps. They're a lineage of wasps. So it's perhaps the whole debate is slightly founded on dodgy territory.
Don't say it at this early stage.
Well, no, it's interesting, though, because we tend to think of bees and wasps as different things. So bees are really wasps.
They are a lineage of wasp, essentially.
Is the reason wasps are so angry because they're wearing those little corsets? Do you think maybe if they had less cinched
the
waists,
wasps
they could
are
have
not angry, right? It's the human-wasp interface.
I mean...
The idea of corsetry, if we could just loosen their corsets, I
think they
can
should
finish
chill
my
out.
mivvy without any kind of interruption, is beautiful.
May I challenge the premise? I don't know anybody who thinks of bees as that cuddly.
Oh, come on.
Which is to say that most people, were there a bee or a wasp near them, are as alarmed by both, no?
I
you see the
disagree. I think there's a certain kind of the bumblish bee that we've been talking about. Say you got scared and you happen to have a rolled up newspaper nearby. If you killed that bee, you would be racked with guilt for 3 or 4 minutes afterwards. As the wasp would be 12 or 14 seconds. I think that is the latest science.
Yeah.
So, but there is, I think people, there's
My point is you'd kill both, right? Neither of them make you feel like, oh, how sweet. It's not like a butterfly.
That's weird, because I do kill butterflies, but not one. No, that's just because we haven't had enough complaints coming in to make it show that we're popular as a show. So if I describe myself as a butterfly murderer, I would imagine the complaints will just zoom up. Anyway, but I think people do think that bees, there's a lot of kind of books about bees. We go, bees wonderful, and I've got this special meadow that I've made for all the bees to make, Hackney honey or whatever, and all of these things.
You walk into bookshops and you trip over books about bees, mostly written by Dave.
For goodness sake, Dave!
And then they think you're weird to write a book about wasps.
In terms of behaviour, are wasps aggressive?
Well, in the same way that bees will only be aggressive if you fall into their nest or annoy them, bees get annoyed too. Wasps will only chase you or attack you if you in some way threaten them. So mostly they get threatened when you fall into their nest, for example, and then who can blame them? They've had this enormous mammal fall into their nest, and they have evolved to respond, to defend their nest against mammals, because their main predators are mammals like badgers. Badgers kind of go straight into the hole of the nest, and they're flailing their arms around and they're breathing heavily. This is sounding a little bit like your picnic or your barbecue. That's exactly what we do. We bat our arms around going, "Go away, wasp," and we're shouting at it. So we are behaving like a badger. So it's only when we behave like badgers that wasps actually attack us.
Now I know I was stung in that open-air production of Wind in the Willows. So...
So the advice would be, so if you don't, we're all used to it when a wasp comes and there's a picnic and you thrash around. So essentially, if you stay still, then they're not going to come and sting you.
Close your mouth.
Close your mouth.
Dave.
That's why he doesn't work on wasps.
Can we talk about the life cycle? So the common one is the yellow jacket, the one that we're used to in summer when we're having picnics. And
so at the moment, are we allowed to say that it's May?
We're allowed to say
I
it's
would
May.
love the idea that the BBC has now reached the point of rules.
You're not allowed
I'm
to
afraid
say
that
what
using
month
that particular calendar may well alienate some of the audience. So we will not be specific and use the whole 12-month calendar.
I mean that you're not going to air this in May, so is it okay to say this is so?
That some people here will repeat in one May or another.
Okay, I'll start again.
It's May.
Okay, so at about the time when the sun starts showing its cheery head, you'll start to see
May. There's a short way of saying that. May.
Come up with a word for that time. What is that?
in the early spring.
Hang on, May's late spring.
I'm going back in time. In early spring, the queens that have been hibernating in your attic come out.
Don't say that.
Well, they might be. They might not be. You might be all right.
Don't
but
worry.
actually, you should be happy that they might be hibernating in your attic.
Should I be happy?
Yeah, because it's a sign that you are going to have a lovely population of pest controllers in your garden. Yeah?
I don't have a garden. I just have an
pesticide.
attic. A new nightmare. A garden. Stand-up comedy, I said.
Shall I get back to the life cycle? Please.
In early spring.
Early spring, queens come out of hibernation. They found a nest on their own. So at the time of year, which is known as May, they tend to build a nest on their own. And I happen to have one in my garden shed. So they build a lovely little nest. They're lone founders. They're a single mum. They go out, they find their wood, chew up a bit of bark, make it into a beautiful paper nest, little fist-sized, lay the eggs, feed them, so they go out hunting. And then after about a few weeks, so about a month, then the brood will emerge as the workers. And there'll be a few workers, and once that's happened, the queen will stay at home and she won't leave the nest again. She basically becomes an egg-laying machine. And the workers go out and do the work. They do the... And by the way, all the workers are always female, both in bees and wasps and ants. The males are simply flying sperm and they come at the end of the colony cycle.
So it's the same as with humans. We get it.
We just
Okay,
can't
only
fly.
half the room like that. You can't even fly, you're right.
So
Dave.
Are they clones? Are they clones, the workers? Clones?
No, they are actually, in the case of the yellow jacket, they are a mixture of full and half sisters because their mum will mate with about 7 different males. She will have done that the previous autumn. So the sisters are closely related, but unlikely to be full sisters. But they are sterile, they're unable to mate themselves. So they are committed to being a worker and they cannot leave the nest and start up their own colony as a queen.
So they mate in the autumn and then the queen hibernates?
Yeah. So over the summer, lots of workers are produced, the colony grows exponentially, and all those workers are your pest controllers in your garden. They're foraging away, they're eating your caterpillars on your cabbages and your aphids on your tomato plants, doing a great job. And then it gets to about August, and then you discover the nest. And by this time, it's maybe got 10,000 workers. But until that point, you'd not realised it was there, and you'd lived quite happily alongside those wasps, no problems. And then suddenly, as soon as you discover that nest, you decide that it has to go. And so you call up the pest controller and you kill it. If you don't do that, and you allow it to live until the end of its colony cycle, in late September, the sexuals will emerge. Next year's queens and the males. And they go off and have a mating flight, and the males mate, die, and the females are mated and they go into hibernation. And the rest of the colony will completely die. So if you've got a nest in your attic or shed from a previous year, it's not like honeybees. They won't be there year after year. The whole colony will die at the end of the summer.
So we really should, if you find a colony in August, September, you should leave it.
You've only got to tolerate them another few weeks. And the point is that you have lived with that wasp nest for months and you've not noticed them. So they are nature's pest controllers. They're there for a reason. They're a top predator.
Well, Catherine, we found those butterfly killers we were looking for. Not just butterflies, little baby butterflies, little caterpillars.
What a sales pitch. There's some top predators and they won't even pay rent. It's like, ooh. No, I'm more endeared. I like the idea of working sisters. That's quite fun. Although the sterility is a little intense, but are bees any better?
Actually, really similar in many ways. So bumblebees have more or less the same annual life cycle. The queen starts a nest on her own in the spring. Honeybees are interestingly different because the queens live for many years and the colony survives the winter. And that's why they make honey, because there aren't any flowers in the winter, so they'd all starve to death. So they make kilos and kilos of honey at the end of the summer so that they can all sit tight in their nest through the winter and they've got something to eat. The more interesting difference is when it comes to the sex, but we can come back to that if you've got something more pressing.
That sounded a bit creepier. I mean, I was going to talk about sex, but if there's something more pressing than
It's quite the gauntlet. It's like, you got something sexier than sex, Catherine? No, I was just going to ask if there's a Republican option, but no, please, let's talk about the sex and the monarchy.
Well, it's just quite weird. So the bumblebees are less exciting. So the young queens, they just mate with one male. And he squirts in this kind of sticky gloop so that she can't mate again, called a mating plug. So
I'm going to be very quiet because this show goes out at 7:30 p.m.
Honeybees have a completely different system where the young queen who hasn't mated, she goes on what's called her nuptial flight, and she flies around releasing a pheromone that attracts the drones, the males. And they mate in midair, so the males will jostle for position around her, and the first one will grab hold of her and mate with her. And they have this bizarre explosive mechanism that blasts sperm into the queen. And it ruptures the male's genitalia and they fall off, and he then falls to the ground dead. You can actually hear the explosion. It's like a little clap.
Why are you listening? That's private, Dave.
They don't do it very privately. They're doing it flying. Anyway, and then the next male jumps on and he has to pull away the bits of the previous male's. And then he explodes, and that goes on until about 20 of them are lying dead on the ground. And then she decides she's had enough, and that's it for her mating for life. You'd think there probably would be enough. And she stores that sperm. There's something like 1.7 million sperm. She stores enough to basically produce 2,000 babies a day for the next 7 years.
Who would name that impressive. A nuptial flight? There's no romance to it at all, Dave.
Well, maybe from a bee's perspective there is, I guess they have a different idea of romance to us.
In terms of, because you were talking recently about being endeared, Catherine, how further endeared do you feel now, having heard that story? Because in some ways it's a pretty good feminist story, isn't it? I mean, the explosion.
You got feminism from a bunch of men jostling to explode sperm into the girl? Her first and only time having sex, I might add.
They're sacrificing their lives for the
Sacrificing their lives? They deserve to die after that abuse.
Isn't that the perfect ending? Look what I'm doing. Oh, no, my genitals have exploded. That definitely won't make the same thing.
Notwithstanding what you've just said, you also mentioned that the bees are the most intelligent of all insects. It doesn't sound...
Does B19 not pick up on the vibe?
I guess their hormones get the better of them.
Yeah. How intelligent are they? So what do we know about bee intelligence?
We know they can learn. They're really good at learning which flowers are most rewarding. They have to be. Actually, what first got me hooked on studying bees all those years ago was I noticed... I was sitting in a park and there was a patch of flowers and there were bees flying around, and I noticed that they often fly up to a flower and at the last second they veer off as if there's something wrong with it. They might do that 2 or 3 times before they land on a flower and drink the nectar. I thought that was a bit odd and I didn't know why they did it, and I ended up spending 5 years, and it turns out... It just sounds odd, doesn't it? But it turns out that as they approach a flower, they sniff it for the smelly footprint of a recent bee visitor. So if a bee's recently landed on the flower, she will have taken the nectar, so it'll be empty, so there's no point. And every time a bee lands on a petal, she doesn't do this deliberately. She accidentally leaves a little smear of oils on the petal, just like we do. I don't know why I'm miming. This is a radio show, isn't it? But I'm holding a glass in my hand, and when you put it down, you leave a smear of oils on it. And it's exactly the same thing. So the bees are using the smelly footprint of other bees as a cue that flower is less rewarding. And it's just one example of many cool things they do. Probably the most famous is the waggle dance, which is a honeybee thing, which is kind of unique in that they can basically communicate with each other. And a worker bee, when she's found a good patch of flowers, comes back to the hive. And she can tell all the other bees exactly which way to go, in what direction, and how far they have to go before they'll find this patch of flowers. And they do this in with a dance in complete darkness inside the hive. Essentially, they buzz and run in a straight line, and then they loop back and run exactly the same line again, and they loop back, each loop being in the opposite direction, so it traces out a kind of figure of 8, strangely. But the essential part is the straight line run they do. The length of the run is proportional to the distance in kilometres that she's telling other bees to go. And the angle of her run on the vertical comb in the dark is the angle from the sun that she wants the other workers to go. And she carries on doing this dance for several hours, during which the sun moves, but even though she can't see it, she knows that, and she adjusts the angle of her run so that she's still accurately sending her fellow workers to the right place. And it's just extraordinary. It's hard to believe that, a little insect with a brain smaller than a grain of rice could do that. They can even recognize human faces. He can teach them, or they can learn which faces will give them a sugar reward, so they can tell them apart.
Wasps can do that too.
They're both great.
In terms of contrasting, so I mean, it's an incredibly difficult, I suppose, question, but in terms of cognitive ability, are they on a similar level?
So my favourite first experiment that I read about is by Sir John Lubbock in the 1800s, who, of course, was Darwin's neighbour. And he did this fabulous experiment, which he describes in great detail, where he has a bottle and he puts a bee in the bottle, and he holds the bottle so that the opening is facing away from the window. But the bottle tops off, so the bee can escape if it's clever enough. But the bee isn't clever enough. It just keeps going towards the bottom of the bottle and banging its head against this bottom of the bottle. That's a bit stupid. He does the same experiment with a wasp, and the wasp doesn't mess around. Straight away, she's out the right end. She's out the proper exit. So I think that sums it up. Don't you think, Dave?
I must admit, bees haven't got the hang of glass, it's true. One day, they get stuck in conservatories all the time. It makes me so sad that my conservatory is usually full of a pile of dead bees. I endlessly shoo them out. But
What's it like having a conservatory? Sounds nice. Here's my question. If they are so individualistic, is there ever social discord?
there's all sorts of social discord, yeah. And actually, that people used to kind of idealize social insects as having this kind of utopian society where they all work together for the common good, but actually it's far from it. Bumblebees in particular, and they seem cute and sweet, but they're not always. When it comes to producing males at the end of the summer, the workers would actually rather produce their own sons rather than rear brothers for slightly complicated reasons. Basically, worker bees who've never mated can still lay eggs that will hatch, but only into sons. Whoa. Which means that the queen who has mated, she can decide when she lays an egg whether it's going to be male or female by allowing it to be fertilized with that big store of sperm she gathered the previous summer. If she allows the egg to be fertilized, it'll be a daughter. So most of the year, she produces daughter workers.
Smart woman.
But when it gets to the end of the year and they know they've got to produce some drones, so then she starts laying some unfertilized eggs. But her workers would rather lay their own son eggs. And if the queen in the bumblebee nest spots one of her daughters laying eggs, which are her grandsons, she eats them. So she's eating her grandchildren. But then the daughters will fight back, and there's lots of them. And often they end up killing the queen. Regicide or matricide.
Or democracy.
You mentioned some of the more unusual wasps. It might be nice to discuss some of the stranger life cycles of wasps rather than the more common ones that we're used to.
Okay, so my gateway wasp, which I do recommend to anyone who's thinking of getting into the wasp world, are the hover wasps.
We're going to move on to much harder wasps, so be careful.
Are the hover wasps of Southeast Asia, and they're just beautiful. Their stings are described as a fragrant tickle because there's this guy who's stung himself lots of times by lots of different insects and describes their stings and how painful they are. These are like the number one on the scale, the least painful. And they live in small groups of about 5 or 6 individuals. And there will be a queen, and the rest of them will be her daughters, just like Dave described. But all of these daughters are capable of mating and setting up their own house. And yet they stay at home and they look after their mother's brood, the siblings. And so it's a lovely society where they have made the decision to stay at home and help rather than leave home and rear their own brood.
That sounds like a guilt-tripping mother. Well, you're more than capable of going out and setting up your own home if you want, but me and your sisters are all going to stay here. So. If you want to leave your poor mother alone, do. It'll sting, but I'll understand.
Well, you're absolutely right. It is a soap opera. It is a total soap opera. And when the Queen died, basically all of her daughters are a queue. They're like ladies in waiting. It's terribly polite. And they basically queue for the chance to be the Queen. So when the Queen eventually dies, or is rudely removed by the experimenter, then the highest rank worker, which is always, without fail, the oldest worker, will calmly step into her shoes and become the new Queen. And then everyone moves up one in the hierarchy. It's so beautifully perfect, it's boring.
Like the civil service.
It's like the civil service, yeah.
You've been here longest, so you get promoted. No offence to the civil service.
Actually, I like to describe these wasps as like the insect version of meerkats, which I hope makes people feel a bit more empathic towards them, because they are just like the same kind of group dynamics that go on in meerkat societies. They are found in these simple societies of these wasps.
That is a brilliant trick at the end. So near the final audience vote, suddenly goes a little bit like meerkats, which you all love, don't you?
You mentioned a couple of gruesome stories. What is the most gruesome behaviour in a wasp?
So I guess the most famous gruesome behaviour. So the zombie wasp. Everybody loves the zombie wasps. It's the emerald jewel wasp. She's very beautiful. She's very glossy. She's kind of iridescent. She's also quite small. She is a stinging wasp. And she's solitary. She lives on her own. So she hunts cockroaches. Cockroaches tend to be quite big. She's got the problem that she's got to find the cockroach. That's the easy bit. The second problem is she's got to paralyse the cockroach. Well, that's kind of all right. She can do that. The third problem is she's got to get the cockroach to the burrow that she's prepared, her nest. And the cockroach is very big. So her solution, well, evolution has provided her with a solution, is this. She has two very precise stings. So one is in the thorax, which is the main body of the cockroach, which stops it squirming around, such that it's still enough that she can then inject right into its brain with a neurotoxin, which renders the cockroach still able to walk, but has no will. And so then what she does is she grabs it by, this isn't going to be very good for the wasp.
What do you mean? It's so cute.
It's meerkats. It's very anywhere.
She grabs the semi-paralysed cockroach by its antenna and she walks it like a poodle to its underground tomb. And it buries itself basically in the tomb. And then she lays her egg on it and seals it up. And then that cockroach is paralysed but remains a beautifully fresh living larder because it's still alive. And also the wasp has put all these sort of antibiotics, antibacterial stuff in with it as well. And then the egg hatches into the larvae, and you know the story. The larvae eats the cockroach from the inside, well, carries on eating it. And it's a beautiful story. Everybody loves the zombie. Yeah, go zombie wasp.
Just to be fair.
Sorry, there's an even better one, though. There is this wasp. It's a spider hunting wasp. It doesn't build a nest, so it's quite unusual for a hunting wasp, solitary hunting wasp. It lays its egg on this spider called Homolotus, and the spider is oblivious, and it goes about its business with this wasp egg on its bottom, and then the egg hatches into a larva and proceeds to eat the spider from the rear, forwards, only eating the bits that are just not necessary, so the bits of chitin and bits of fat and bits of muscle. And meanwhile, the spider is carrying on its daily business, oblivious to the fact that its derriere is being nibbled up by a wasp larva. And it carries on eating until it's big enough to pupate, and only at that point, so the last things it eats are the vital organs, and at that point, when it's ready to pupate, the spider finally keels over and dies, and all that's left of it are its mandibles.
Wow.
Now, Dave.
Well, no, yes, just to be fair, I want the most gruesome bee, other than the exploding genitals, which we've had.
I think wasps definitely have it when it comes to most gruesome, but bees do some things that are fairly unpleasant. Probably the best I can think of are the cuckoo bees. So some bees have, just like cuckoos, given up bothering to make their own nests. They sneak into the nests of other species of bee, wait till the adults are away, and lay their own eggs, which hatch really quickly, and the little cuckoo larvae have huge jaws, which they have just for the first instar of their life for murdering the host's offspring. So they crawl around, kill all the host's offspring, and then eat all their food, which seems a little harsh. But fascinating, all part of life's rich tapestry, I guess.
Yeah. So, Catherine, now, before we go out to the audience, as the barometer of public taste, where are you now on bees versus wasps?
horrified. I'm traumatized. Look, I want to like an underdog, but as has been made clear multiple times, they are the top predator, and so I don't feel as sorry for wasps as the PR machine might have led me to. That was disgusting, truly scary, and I don't want any part of it. So, you can keep your butterfly killing horror show. I'm sticking with the bees.
Right, well, let's find out what the audience thinks. So, those who'd like to vote for bees? Those who'd like to vote for wasps? Oh, I think the wasps have it.
And that is the psychopath test as far as I'm concerned.
I completely agree with you. I think the wasps redeemed themselves. I'm fascinated by both. I mean, that's the wonderful thing, isn't it? They are wonderfully interesting, complex animals.
They do definitely need a PR makeover, and we need to so move beyond the picnic wasp. I didn't tell you how to deal with the picnic wasp. Can I just end with that? Yeah. So if a wasp does come to your picnic, which it will do in the summer, depending on whether it's early or late summer, it will be wanting different things. Now, if it's early summer, then probably it will be going for protein. So it might go for your ham or your sausage or your chicken sandwich. So if she arrives and she wants some of your chicken sandwich, then my top tip to you is let her have some. Give her a wasp offering. She'll take a bit of your chicken back to the brood, and then she'll come back again for some more. You can set aside a tiny bit of your sandwich for her and just gradually move it away from you as she comes and goes. And using the landmarks that Dave spoke about previously, the wasp will come flying and zigzagging back in front of you. She's not coming to get you. She's simply using you as a landmark to find out where that chicken sandwich has gone. So that's what happens early in the summer. And then late in the summer, she'll be looking for sugar. And that's when she goes for your beer and your Prosecco and your lemonade and your jam. So it's the larvae that are the carnivores. The actual adult wasps themselves are vegetarians. And so during the main part of the summer, they're hunting protein to feed to the brood. But at the end of the summer, the larvae have pupated, and pupae don't need feeding. And so you've basically got nests full of furloughed wasps who don't need to hunt anymore, but they still need to get sugar to keep their own personal nutrition. And normally they go to flowers to get nectar, just like bees do, but actually your jam or your beer is also quite an attractive option. So ham to jam, give them an offering and you're sorted.
It's like treat a wasp like your girlfriend on her period. If she wants to eat it, just let her have it. And step slowly away from the chicken sandwich. And then she won't bother you.
The one thing, we've run out of time, but I just wanted you to mention, David, that I read in the notes that bees are just terrible flyers, which is a ridiculous thing to contemplate.
Obviously, there's this sort of myth that bumblebees shouldn't be able to fly according to the calculations of some physicist, which I don't think actually any physicist ever did calculate. But they're not very aerodynamic. You look at a bumblebee, this big, round, heavy thing with tiny little wings. Yeah. And they do have to beat them really fast to stay in the air. That's part of the secret of it. And there's some complex physics about creating little vortices with the tips of their wings, and they make a kind of figure-of-8 motion. But, however, it does work clearly because they do fly, but it is energetically really expensive for them. So there's this slightly crazy calculation that a running man will burn the calories in a Mars bar in about an hour of running, which is quite depressing if you're running to lose weight. But if you had a man-sized bumblebee, it would burn the calories in a Mars bar in 30 seconds of flying. So their whole life, they've lived on a kind of knife edge between, being full and being starving. So a bumblebee with a full stomach is about 40 minutes from starvation. And if she runs out of energy, she can't find enough flowers, then she's reduced to walking, and then she's in big trouble because you can't get to flowers if you're on foot. And you do find, particularly in the early spring, you'll see sometimes bees wandering along a footpath or whatever, and it's basically usually because they've run out of energy.
That wouldn't have been such a good advertising jingle, though, would it? A Mars every 40 minutes helps you work, but then you need another one very, very soon. You're gonna die.
Brilliant advertising jingle.
Well, okay, I am available. What I think is very interesting as well is that how knowledge changes your attitude to things. Because I have to say, for instance, when I read Serian's book about wasps, it really changed my attitude to wasps because it gave me more information. When something's just an erratic thing that you know nothing about, but even just by the knowledge of it, I think it changes how you experience something. Anyway, so I hope that at the end of this show you're all a little bit less scared of wasps than you were, or alternatively, that you're suddenly much more scared of meerkats than you used to be. It could go either way. Now, did we ask the audience a question, Brian?
Yes, the audience question was, what creature are you most irrationally scared of and why? And Richard said a spider, because I hit one with a newspaper and it ran under the bed. But like elephants, spiders never forget. It's now been 20 years and I'm still living in fear, waiting for its return.
What have you got, Catherine?
Bruce says, my mother-in-law, and it's not irrational. I've never met the woman. I don't want to besmirch her good name, Bruce. They can't all be bad mothers-in-law, can they?
No. Mine's very nice.
You have to say that, Robin.
No, I don't. She's really good. I'll tell you what, her melanzana parmigiana, apart from anything else, would win me over. Hope you're listening, Susan.
Timothy said, my partner is a vet, and much like her patients, I'm irrationally afraid of her.
Have you got another one, Catherine?
Sam says, flying fish, because wings can only get wetter.
In case you don't know, Catherine, because I know you're the youngest on the panel, a long time ago, Brian was in a pop band. Thank you so much to our panel, Sarah-Ian Sumner, David Goulson and Catherine Bohart. And next week, we are going foraging.
What for?
We are going foraging for magic.
Ooh. You are going for that youth audience, aren't you?
Magic. It says mushrooms here in the script.
No. Just magic. The magic that lives in the forest.
You've been researching?
I have tried a little bit of next week's show, and all I'm saying is I saw a little elf wearing slippers made of gold.
Next week we'll be exploring the magic of mushrooms. Maybe Robin will be back with us by then.
Goodbye. There was a little goblin as well who was playing the zither.
In the infinite monkey cage. Turned out nice again.
Hello, I'm Brian Cox.
I'm Robin Ince, and this is the Infinite Monkey Kennel.
Or basket.
Or possibly Infinite Monkey Cardboard Box. Because today we are pitting two of the nation's favourite pets together in the biggest battle between species ever broadcast on Radio 4 on Saturday night.
Or the repeat on Wednesday.
Or the repeat on Wednesday afternoon, which might also be on Mondays, actually, as well.
Yeah, you might be listening on BBC Sounds as well, or wherever you get your podcast.
Or wherever you... This is the problem with doing big Saturday night, World of Sport, Dickie Davis, giant haystack-style intros. People don't receive the media like they used to, do they?
Who remembers Dickie Davis? That dates
Yes. We got to Dickie Davis much faster than normal, didn't we, Brian? Brian, of course, has a slight Dickie Davis thing because he actually has some of his hair dyed grey, so you think he's a real boy. Very clever. So, you marvelled at bats versus flies. You gasped at wasps versus bees. Now it is the ultimate challenge. It is cats versus dogs. In the red corner, we have a dachshund. In the blue corner, we were meant to have a Russian blue-haired cat, but it's just wandered off, because that's what they do. It's wandered off probably for a few days, maybe even a few weeks. It's gone off for long enough that eventually the owner, in tears, goes around all the neighbouring telegraph poles and pops up little lost cat images all over it, weeping, and then after about 4 weeks, it just comes back nonchalantly through the cat flap and goes, yeah, I've just been out, what of it? Give me a gourmet meal, and I might purr before I dig my claws in really unnecessarily tightly.
So
I'm a dog person, by the way.
So in today's show, we ask what makes the best pet, cat or dog? In order to conduct, perhaps, the greatest scientific debate since Shapley and Curtis discussed the nature of a spiral nebula on 25th of April 1920 at the Smithsonian, we will explore the science of breeding domestic pets.
No, some of them definitely knew about that, Brian. I definitely
yeah, more than knew about Dickie Davis, anyway.
We'll explore the science of breeding domestic pets, the relative intelligence and skills of the aforementioned species.
And which one of them really loves you? Because some of them are lying. So, to help us sort out the Abyssinian from the Alsatian, we are joined by an evolutionary scientist, a vet, a dragon, and someone who spent much of their life living in a fantasy world. And they are
Hello, I'm Deborah Meaden. I am businesswoman, investor and TV dragon. And I think a great ambassador for dogs is Old Yeller. I don't know if anybody remembers Old Yeller, but it was the most loyal. It was a film that I watched when I was much younger. And when I can't even say the name Old Yeller now without feeling slightly emotional.
I'm Ben Garrett. I'm an evolutionary biologist, broadcaster. I've written a whole series about dogs, and I think my doggy ambassador is the littlest hobo. It's like a kick-ass version of Lassie.
Hi, I'm Jess French. I'm a vet, an author and a children's TV presenter. And my favourite cat ambassador has got to be Garfield, because who doesn't love a ginger cat and lasagna?
I am David Baddiel. I'm a writer and comedian, and I'm going to nominate myself as the best ambassador ever for cats, purely on the basis that I once owned a cat called Chairman Meow. It's the best name ever for a cat. And actually, I know it's the best name ever for a cat because when I took it to the vet for the first time, took her actually to the vet for the first time, it got a big laugh in the waiting room. You know, what's the name of the cat? Chairman Meow, massive laugh. But the receptionist just wrote down on her computer, Meow, right? Just like her surname. So when I went into the actual vet and the vet got up the cat's details on his computer, I could tell he was thinking, Meow, what an unoriginal... So that was disappointing, but yeah, that's why.
And this is our panel. So we need now to talk about, well, really, all of you to explain your interest, why you are supporting the animals that you are. Well, let's start with you, Jess, right? So you are fighting on Team Cat. Let's just find out how many people in the audience are on Team Cat. And how many on Team Dog? Immediately a lower voice there. Yeah. Lower voice.
That's the thing, which is, I think, as someone who spends a lot of time going on about being a cat man, is that it's seen by some people, the dog people, as a little bit not right for a man to be obsessed with cats, which I think is a very questionable idea in 2024.
Oh, I feel... No. You're clickbaiting the issue there. That's
I am.
Making everyone seem like a bigot now just because they've got a dog. Oh,
you are a bigot, Robin
And
Ince.
also, tell you what, my long-haired Dachshund Maximilian's going to take you down.
This is because we've set this sign show up in an adversarial manner, as is often the want of broadcasters. And it's nonsense. So I'm going to stop it now.
There we go.
I'm going to ask a sensible question. I'm not interested.
No, hang on, we want to... I think we want to know. We want to know, because also, I just like the way, David, you said, I'm a cat man, which actually sounded more like you were kind of a jazz musician in the 1950s, which I really enjoyed.
I thought he was a superhero.
Yeah, superhero. In Batman, but not woman. Not Catwoman, Catman. Which wouldn't work, because Batman would think, well, no, I'm Batman, so you have to be Catwoman. This is ridiculous, David.
I'm confused.
Yeah, so am I. Jeff, why are you a cat woman?
Well, listen, I spend my day job working with both cats and dogs, and I love them both. But I feel like with a cat, you really have to earn that love. You know, with a dog, they love everyone, don't they? You've got a treat for them. They come to you. But with cats, you really have to do something special to earn that love. They're not just going to come to anyone, you know. They decide, you're for me or you're not. So I'm Team Cat, simply because I think they make you feel a bit special.
Right, let's move over to Ben, Team Dog.
I agree with everything Jess said. That's why I'm Team Dog. I've got enough complex relationships in my life without having to try and impress a bloody cat. If I feed you, give you a home, I'm not in some sort of abusive thing with my cats and dogs at home, but if it takes more than that for them to love me, it's one fewer cat, one more dog. That's
it, because a friend of mine said, and I never thought of this before, how the relationships are so opposite. Exactly what you were saying there, that a dog says, yeah, I love you. And you go, isn't it nice to be loved? And a cat says, well, you'll have to earn my respect. Deborah.
I've got cats, and I hope they're not going to be listening to this, because I think they know more than they let on. But dogs are a lot less worrying than cats, aren't they? You know where your dogs are, and you walk in the house, and they're enthusiastic, and they love you, and they jump up, and they see you. But as you say, cats you might not see for months on end. So, yeah, I think dogs are a lot less worrying.
But the problem is, right, that essentially dogs, and you're right, it's a false binary. I quite like dogs. Dogs are fine. They're just not cats. Cats are absolutely brilliant, right? I think the dog people want the cat people to hate dogs, and we don't. Also, you said that thing about how cats disappear. Dogs are always there. Dogs are in your face. Dogs are like, I love you, I love you, I love you. There should be a restraining order. Stalkers.
Can I ask a science question? I would like to ask Jess, as a vet, if we go back to basics, what are the physiological differences between cats and dogs?
Yeah, so they're both part of the same order, the Carnivora, and they both essentially a very similar body plan. But cats are perfectly adapted for hunting. They are obligate carnivores, which means they have to eat meat, whereas dogs will eat a combination of meat and vegetables and basically whatever they can find lying around. I'm sure if you've got dogs, you know that they will eat just about anything. So cats have this really perfectly adapted body for hunting. They have these incredibly sharp claws, which are protractile, that they can pull them in when they want, but actually most of the time they are in and they only bring them out when they need them, which means they remain perfectly sharp. They have these incredibly flexible bodies, which mean they can jump and climb and get up trees, jump out of trees. They're brilliant, perfect hunters.
If cats are brilliant hunters, which I'm sure they are, why have they thought, instead of hunting, we will colonise humans and they will feed us? What is it in humans that so responds to cats and dogs, that finds them cute? Like, is it to do with the fact that I see a cat and it seems with its big eyes and tiny nose to be a sort of very, very pretty version of a human? That sounds a bit weird.
We're keeping that bit in for sure.
It sounds weird. But I do find cat faces to be incredibly attractive. That sounds weird as well.
At this point, David started to pull out the various different dresses and skirts he'd made for his cat.
Yeah.
I'd also like to say that the other end of the cat is really not very attractive.
That is, I would say, the greatest argument against cats when you're staying at someone's house and you are woken up by their cat's bottom there on display,
and
like
they do
some
it.
morbid pencil sharpener.
They do it. They do it.
Why do they do that, by the way?
My cat does something else, which is another reason why I like dogs so much. If I don't wake up when the cat would like me to wake up, obviously the cat's in charge of the house, he licks my eyelid open.
Wow. That's brilliant.
You think that's brilliant?
Yeah, it's brilliant.
You wait till your cat does it to you. It's not.
I like almost anything. Again, weird. Cats. Like once I lost a cat. We take our cats on holiday in England if we're renting somewhere, and they will let us have a cat, right? And we have 4 of them. We got 4. I'm nuts, right? We have 4 cats, and one of them, Ron, who is polydactyl, which means that he's got 7 toes, is unbelievably strong cat. He's essentially a lion cub. He went missing when we had to leave that property and be out of there by sort of 12 o'clock. He went missing. He was found 3 hours later in the attic. I'd spent 2 hours crawling in the insulation. My lungs were about to give out. I was sweating. I was so angry. I found him. I held on to him. And as soon as I saw him, I thought, oh, Ron. Because of the faces.
In evolutionary terms, so how far do we have to go back to find the common ancestor between the dog and the cat? So what's the
most likely common ancestor is a group of mammals that lived just around about the time of the extinction of the dinosaurs. So it left an opportunity for loads of other things to suddenly diversify, and we saw the mammals explode onto the scene. So we had a group called the Miacids, which looked like civets or genets or sort of weaselly type things that lived right across North America, right into North Africa. It was quite a wide distribution. And they did really well, lots of different environments. They started to split into some of the groups we see today. And as far as modern cats, they started to branch off about 10.5 million years ago, and then dogs about 7.5 million years ago. So they're quite recent splits from a tree that we can trace back to about between 45 and 60 million years ago.
Do we see a pattern in the animals that can be domesticated, or is it just down to the ones that we have chosen to domesticate? So Jess, when there are certain animals brought in, I imagine every now and again there might be a more eccentric pet that comes across, into your veterinary practice.
There's certainly ones that are not a good idea to have. I mean, it sounds like you think one of those is a cat. But I suppose, originally we thought about domesticating things that we could eat, and then cats probably came about because we had these grain stores, and that attracted rodents, and that's what brought the cats near to us, and they realised maybe living around humans wasn't so bad. Generally, these days, though, people seem to think you can domesticate anything, and that really isn't the case. You know, most of the animals that we have these really incredible relationships with, so cats and dogs, that's been going on for thousands of years. It's not like you can just suddenly take an animal from the wild and put it in a cage and that suddenly becomes what we see as a domestic animal or a pet. It really is only specific animals that I think make good pets.
And we see this with some cats and dogs, don't we? So there's a rise in servals, these beautiful African long-legged cats that are gorgeous, that people describe as very dog-like, and they're a modern pet. And we see occasionally wolves or very recent wolf domesticated things coming into the UK, and they're terrible pets. So even within the dog-cat groups, there are things that still don't make good pets at all. But in terms of what you can domesticate a lot, given enough time.
I'm going to bring it back to the binary, because I think there is fun to be had in the binary, even if it's not real. Cats have actually won, right? And the way we can tell they've won is the internet, because the most viewed thing on the internet by miles and miles and miles is cats, more than porn. And I say that as an avid fan of both. Right? Like, there are many
When you
more
say both again, we need to return. Is there a shaded area in that Venn diagram?
Do you find that, Deborah, as someone who's got both dogs and cats, how do you perceive their relative intelligence, capacity for empathy and so on?
So I think they're both pretty smart, and I think they just show their intelligence in completely different ways. So my cats have 5 words. I know their noises. I know I want to go out. I want my food. But they're a lot more independent, and I think that they have empathy, but they have it on their own terms. And quite frankly, when they can't be bothered, they can't be bothered. Dogs, I think, are very different because they are there all of the time. I've got 5 dogs, and there's always one at my side. There's always one touching my hand, which just gives me the impression that they want this close relationship. And the cat's like, I want it when I want it, but not so when I don't.
There was actually a study that investigated exactly that, where they monitored cats in their home environments, and they monitored how many times the humans, actually it was all women, how many times the women initiated the contact with the cats, and how many times the cats initiated the contact with the women. And they found that if the human initiated the contact with the cat, then the resulting interaction, if there was one, sometimes the cats just walked off, but when there was a resulting interaction, it was much shorter than if the cat initiated the interaction. But they found that if the owner was receptive to when the cat came over and initiated the interaction, then they were much more likely to subsequently tolerate it when the woman initiated it.
I love that, though, tolerate it. That is the word. That is exactly the word.
It says a lot, I suppose, ultimately about, the egos of the owners, which is, would you rather be loved or merely tolerated? And it kind of...
I think loved. I think most people would be rather...
That idea, I think it shows, again, from a Freudian perspective, David, I think the idea...
I'm not having this toleration. I mean, some cats, because it implies just a generic idea. And I would say the generic idea, sorry about this, does apply to dogs. Dogs all love you. Yeah. Cats, some love you and some don't. And also some cats attach to particular people in a household. To be honest, quite a lot of my cats don't really like me. What's going on, right? How needy am I? I love them.
In an academic sense, measuring the intelligence of animals is notoriously difficult. Is there research into the intelligence level, in some sense, of cats and dogs? And if we're in the adversarial mood, what do we know about which is the smartest animal?
So you're right, you've hit the nail on the head there. It's so difficult to do this. So what we're seeing right across the animal behaviour board is almost a reset. So standardising testing of intelligence across animals. But you're looking at a really socially adept animal, the dogs, and a very intelligent, stealthy hunter, cats. So you've got to assess those in different ways. If you assess their social behaviour, then dogs will always be better at that.
Because they're pack animals.
But they're pack animals. We've bred them to work alongside us, and we've got 360 at least breeds of dog around the world, and they do everything from transport, such as sledding, to bomb detecting, to therapy. Imagine cats doing any of these things. Trusting a cat with a bomb? No. Absolutely no.
Well, it would diffuse it one way or the other.
It would, yeah, absolutely.
So the dogs don't diffuse it, do they? They sniff it out, but they don't...
But a cat would do that thing at the edge of the table where it's just pushing. No, boom.
To continue, though, in terms... So the dog's a pack animal. It's got some abilities to live in groups.
And in terms of understanding you from a social perspective, they're much better at reading your face. I'm very dangerously close to agreeing with David a little bit here. It's not that they're aloof, they just can't read you in the same way that a dog can.
Which is related to their evolutionary history, the way that they live.
They have to hunt as a pack, they live as a pack, they understand their social dynamic. A cat doesn't do that. They're semi-solitary, they don't need to look at faces, and they don't have the same range of facial expressions that dogs do. But if you're looking at pure intelligence from a hunting, stealthy, sensory base, then cats almost always outperform dogs. So you're comparing two very different things.
As a vet, when we're treating these animals, so dogs and cats, which is the most difficult to deal with? Or easiest?
One of the most difficult things in a veterinary consultation is getting the cats out of the baskets. So in that respect, cats are really difficult just to even look at in the first place. And cats are really, really good at hiding if there's anything wrong with them. Whereas a dog will come in and, it's really labouring it, it's limping on its leg, really ham it up. Whereas the cats, they're so brave and they just take it all, been hit by a car, broken every bone in its body, but it just sort of lays there with a sort of dejected look on its face. Oh, not again. It's another life gone.
To be fair, the other reason it's probably just lying there is it's broken every bone in its body. I'm sort of trust you a bit now.
I have picked up on something. I'm going to have to say this now. From a scientific perspective, I do think you two are far more vocal than what we are, Deborah and I. I'm just saying, I think we're more reasonable. And it's scientifically based.
Yeah.
I have a fear that you both have a brain parasite.
Oh.
And Jess is looking suspicious because do you come across something called toxoplasmosis, Jess?
I will not disclose if I have or have not come across them.
So, there is a tiny single-celled protozoa parasite that lives inside rodents, rats and mice predominantly in the UK. Now, that parasite can only reproduce, weirdly, and we don't know why, in the gut of a cat. And it controls the rodent's brains to the point where they become sexually attracted to the cats and will go and actively seek them out.
David.
Yeah. I knew I shouldn't have eaten that leftover whiskers.
So we see that the rodents actively seek out the cats so that this parasite can reproduce inside the cat. However, research has shown, loads of research in repeated situations has shown that up to 50% of cat owners have this brain parasite. So who's got a cat here? Oh, no hand, literally no hands went up then.
So what's the test for it? Just fancying cats? Yeah. Or is it more than that?
No, it can really... your inhibitions completely diminish.
Yeah, this is me.
Yeah, ability to assess risk completely goes. There's quite a whole sort of, plethora from certain mental health problems right through to risk detection are associated with the presence or absence of toxoplasmosis in us. So approximately in the UK, they reckon it's about 51%, which is very close to 52%. Are infected with this brain parasite because of cats. So no wonder you two are so rabidly obsessed with your cats. It's not your fault. You've just brain controlled. That's fine.
So they're zombies.
Yeah,
You're
those two.
arguing with
Those two.
The zombie theory of consciousness.
Yeah. Whereas we're clearly not.
Jess.
Deborah, you have cats too, right?
I have got cats.
Yeah, I think you might have this parasite.
Now, hold on. Can I say, I've never had, a rat has never shown any sense of attraction to me whatsoever.
No, but actually recently they've found that this risk-taking behaviour can make you much more successful, and entrepreneurs are really, really likely to have this parasite.
It sounds like a good thing. This parasite.
It's
sounds
remarkable.
brilliant.
So half the population.
Yeah.
Although, of course, it doesn't manifest itself in any particular way.
No, there's a whole range, but it's most of us will never know you've got it. You're not going to start leave here and go buy a pack of Dreamies this evening. But it's scientifically, there's at least a significant proportion of us in this room tonight will have a parasite because of a cat. And it does control our brains in some way, shape or form. I don't really think those two over there are being controlled by a tiny parasite to love cats more.
Well, one of them is.
Can ask? Because we were talking
It's
about
a pretty good
intelligence.
argument, by the way, isn't it? The debates, the cats versus dogs. I have 2 cats. I'm now swaying toward dogs after.
You did say you were pretty angry with your cats at the moment. You've had trouble with them, haven't you?
Well, not really. They bother me too much. So I was interested in what you said, actually, that the way to stop them bothering me is to ignore them completely.
They prefer to be ignored. They're more likely to come up for some attention if they're ignored. So that's what you want to be doing.
I had a terrible moment. This is going to be, in terms of you thinking I've got this parasite, what's it called?
Toxoplasmosis.
Okay, this will demonstrate that I have got it, I'm afraid. So one thing that one of my cats does is that Zelda is that she will come to my wife if my wife sings Only You by Yazoo, right? So my wife is away at the moment filming. Zelda doesn't really like me, and I was in bed and I thought, oh, she's over there. I could see her ignoring me, and I have a recording on my phone of Morwenna singing this song because I want the cats to come to me. So I played it. Zelda came on the bed, she looked at the phone, she looked at me, and she went off again.
Can I just say at this point, thank you very much for your honesty this evening. It's been very refreshing. I wanted to know a little bit about the intelligence, though, going back to that of how we test intelligence. Like you were saying, there are the problems of... Because when we had a crow on the show, you didn't get on with that crow. Lovely, lovely.
Well, it didn't get on with me.
No, it didn't like you. Didn't take to you at all. And we saw the intelligence of the crow dealing with different kind of puzzles. What are the equivalent versions for a dog to see at what level it can deal with a puzzle or whatever it might be?
So we can give them a whole bunch of enrichment tests where they have to, everything from pulling levers and pressing buttons, and you can give them multi-staged, effectively games with a reward. And we've tried the same, well, colleagues have tried the same with cats. And this is not to be disparaging to cats, actually. There is a genuine response that we very often can't tell whether they can't do it or just don't want to. And that's almost an official response. Like, I think they probably could if they wanted to. And that probably goes to your side. They're just very independent and quite sassy, whereas a dog will do it potentially to please the researcher and to get the reward. The cat can't really be bothered, really. So we don't know.
When we look at dogs, a huge range of dogs and sizes and shapes, and they've been bred to be working dogs and pets and so on. With cats, not so much. But are you seeing now, as a vet, are you seeing more specific breeds? Is that becoming more fashionable, that people are trying to craft the cats into different shapes and colours and
Yeah,
more
I
diversity?
think so. Historically, the difficulty with breeds of cats is that because they're going out and doing whatever they want to do, they can mate with whoever they want to. So the lines became very mixed. But now people are starting to keep their cats indoors more. It's easier to sort of control that breeding lines. And yeah, I think it is becoming more fashionable to have breeds of cat, I suppose. But still, there are 73 types of breeds of cat. And there's, 300 and something breeds of dogs. So we've still got a long way to go until we see that diversity, and they're still much more similar. You don't get, a Chihuahua and a Great Dane. We don't have that huge diversity in cats like we do in dogs.
It's funny, 73 breeds, because could you, Deborah, could you name many? I can't really name many breeds. You could say Bengal and...
Yeah, a dozen, maybe.
You can name a dozen breeds of cat?
Probably.
Siamese.
You're going to make me do it now, aren't you?
Yeah.
Siamese, Burmese, Abyssinian, Savannahs, short hair, Russian blues, Norwegian blues, Maine Coons, Swedish blues.
It's a better moment than I thought it would be. I'll be honest with you.
Cornish Rex, and those, what are the ones without any hair?
Sphinx
cats.
Yeah, we had Devon Rexes, actually.
Oh, I like a Devon Rex.
Yeah.
That problem of breeding, do we see similar things in cats? Because we've heard a lot of things about the fact that the number of different breeds of dogs means that there are many dogs that have been bred to a point of really, life-shortening kind of shapes and sizes.
Yeah, historically we bred animals for purposes. So lots of the dogs came from hunting, or, they had specific jobs. But over recent years, we've sort of tended more towards breeding for aesthetics. And so we're starting to breed in these brachycephalic faces, which are the squashed flat faces, which are really problematic for breathing. And we are definitely starting to do that with cats as well. So there's a trend at the moment for specifically breeding polydactyl cats, which have extra digits because people think they look like they've got huge paws, more like lions or big cats. And certain cats with sort of coat conditions or curved ears or shortened tails. These are all things for aesthetics. They don't have a function. And of course, they then have an impact on the animal's life.
And sometimes that's really high, isn't it? There are certain dog breeds, I'm thinking of one in particular, where about 40% have a condition called Chiari's malformation, where the back of the brain actually tonsillates or herniates through the skull into the vertebrae. And it's a really common breed that a lot of older people often have because they're quite sweet little lap dogs. And it's because we're, as Jess said, so selectively breeding these things. We are messing them up a little bit, aren't we? I think both sides is something we can all agree on here, that it's keep it nice and general.
Well, in general, what has the longest lifespan? The cats live longer or the dogs live longer?
Cats live longer.
Cats live longer. But there was a dog recently, it was 31 or something, wasn't it?
Really?
Yeah. But that's an anomaly. But yeah, typically cats are much longer lived. It's the anger keeps them going.
Deborah, how different do you think your life would be if you didn't have those pets? What do they give you? And we can talk about this with cats and dogs. We don't have to say cats versus dogs. Obviously, it is that sense of what it gives you psychologically.
My face went all soft then, and it went soft because I cannot imagine life without them. I'm, as we all are, very busy all day, every day. I'm away from home. There's a lot of stuff bombarding at me. And when I go home and they don't care who I am, what I do, how busy I am. They just want their life with me. And it's a very, very therapeutic thing. It's very relaxing. And to have them look at you in that way. Dogs, they want to please you.
Can I just ask, I wanted to, in the adversarial spirit of the show, so in terms of the senses of these animals, so dogs versus cats, so what are the differences?
In a lot of the senses, cats are going to come on top because they are superior hunters and they use all of their senses in doing that. So with eyesight, cats can see in 3 colours, dogs can only see in 2. Both of them can see movement really well because they're both trying to catch prey. Cats can see really, really well in low light as well. So they can see about 6 times better than us in low light, whereas dogs can only see 5 times better.
But just one more evolutionary question. I don't know if this is correct, but I read somewhere that a cat meow, and cats only meow to humans. How clever are cats? They only meow to humans. They don't meow to other cats. And I read it's because they know that it's a bit like a baby's cry, and we will respond to it. How do they know that?
They actually do meow to other cats, but only when they're kittens. So kittens will meow to their parents. And I think...
That means my cats think I am their dad. This is what I want.
The adults also meow to their kittens, so it could be that they think you're their child. With the cat personality, it's probably more likely.
It's very Schrodinger's, the whole thing.
They also do this special thing called a solicitation purr, which is where when they're purring, they add in this really high-pitched bit, which, like you said, sounds like a baby cry. And they know that that's much, much, much more likely to get a response from us. We see it as much more urgent when they put this extra high-pitched bit into their purr.
What does that sound like?
It sounds like a purr with a high-pitched baby cry.
It does fit in, doesn't it, with the slightly cliched idea of cats, that they are the only animal who purrs. They're the only animal who, in a performative way, says, I'm having a good time.
Cat purrs are incredible as well.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly why they do it. We think it might be self-soothing, but they also have this incredible quality of they can heal bones and they can heal skin. They can make granulation tissue grow. So the cat's purr is at 25 hertz and 50 hertz, and we actually use those frequencies in medical healing to promote bone growth and to promote healing after surgery and things like that. And cats do heal really, really well after surgery. We see that.
So we could strap purring cats to sick people. Because a dog would do it. If a dog could save someone, be like, I'll be there, strap me to you now. A whole bunch of cats? Never. No.
So we've covered... sight-wise, then, not a great deal of difference. You said.
I mean, they can see better in the dark, but
in terms of smell, for example,
smell's a tricky one because dogs have such a wide range. So we have something like a bloodhound, which has 300 million olfactory receptors.
Let's take that one.
But sort of the average dog would have maybe, say, 100 million, whereas the average cat would have 200 million. And we come back to this debate that dogs are really varied. We have chihuahuas, we have bloodhounds, we have collies. They're really diverse. We can't say there isn't really an average dog because dogs are so variable, whereas cats are all relatively similar.
Can I ask about the Chihuahua, right? Because there's a friend of mine who's got one, and it's an incredibly angry dog that's always kind of trying to have a fight, and yet never seems to realise it could easily be picked up and thrown out the window. And it does feel like the short man at the bar, you know, that kind of thing. What is it in the breeding that has led to them behaving in a way which seems to entirely reject the notion that they really won't be able to handle anything?
I mean, we don't actually know if they feel pain because of it, but they do have a malformation with their brain, which means that it's always under quite a lot of pressure. Their skull is enlarged, and so they might have a constant headache, which, you know, it would make you quite angry.
Because actually we've said all this thing about dogs being friendly. Not all dogs are friendly.
No.
Some dogs are horrible, and some cats do appear to be friendly. And, you know, that's one of, I mean, basically what we're really saying is the whole supposition of this show is based on lies, and just because it looks good in the Radio Times listings. But fortunately we've waited till the end to give that away.
Well, it's true. I mean, I've gathered that we're asking simple questions such as, why is the best eyesight, cats or dogs? And you rightly say, well, it depends. What's the best sense of smell? It depends. There's as much variation within dogs as there are between species, you know, in some sense. It is a ludicrous conceit.
And it's because, as Jess said
sorry,
earlier...
by the way, everyone, I'm sorry we brought you here, and I'm sorry we've wasted your evening.
But Jess said earlier, we've kind of hit on what a cat does really well. It hunts, and it will provide companionship in its own terms, in your own terms, in your relationship, whereas, rightly or wrongly, we've managed to diversify dogs into several hundred jobs, and it's effectively made, well, we call them breeds, obviously, but they're each one has a different role. So from Chihuahuas, they have a role. A Great Dane has a role. Bullies have roles. All these different dogs, whether they're lap dogs or hunting dogs.
What role does a Chihuahua have, then?
Fits into a handbag.
Do you know what? That is not far off. There was someone that my sister used to know that her mum had two Chihuahuas that she couldn't feel that she could leave them outside the supermarket, so she wore a larger bra and she would place the two dogs inside it. You remember her, don't you, sis? She's in the audience tonight. Not the woman with the... You'd know if she was in the audience. Really lady.
I'm going to ask you a difficult question. I'm going to force you to choose, Deborah. So because you have both, if I were to say, as an evil scientist, you can only have one. You can either have the cats or the dogs. What would you do? I know it's an impossible question, but
the cats are listening. That's right. I know. They know how to take revenge. Cats, don't they? I mean, they've got sharp claws. Oh, don't! It's really hard. They play really different roles in my life, and I know you want me to choose.
That's an interesting point, though, that you said that they play different roles.
Different roles. They're very different beings, and in the same way, it's very difficult physiologically to work out the differences between them. The relationships are different, so I can't.
Brian, ask me to make up my mind.
You haven't got a dog, have you?
I don't have a dog, but
I
just wanted you to say, David, make up your mind.
Go on, David, make up your mind.
Cat.
What's the cat wearing? Is there any evidence for better well-being if you've got a dog rather than a cat?
There's a long-term study done in Tokyo looking at the relationship between aging and owning cats or dogs, and over 11,000 people were studied, randomized testing and everything. Those who had dogs were 40% less likely to develop Alzheimer's, for example, whereas there is no discernible difference owning cats. And as Deborah said earlier, part of that is going out, and physically you don't typically walk your cat, and you don't sort of take your cat on the beach twice. So part of it is a lifestyle, I guess, as well, but maybe it's harder to tease apart that relationship. But yeah, there are, on the surface at least, quite significant differences between human health, longevity, better health, and owning dogs.
Do you think that there's part of that's when you take your dogs out, you talk to people? You know, there's a lot of communication around dogs, whereas your cats are very much in your home and they're yours. And I think communication must be a helpful thing in terms of Alzheimer's.
The summary, Ben, really is that what you've basically said is cat owners are ultimately turned into zombies and will die young. So, David,
how would we summarise then? So we're where we started, really. Any progress?
Who are cat people? Who are the dog people? Who says love all the animals but not as much as David? We also asked our audience a question, and we wanted to know what is the one animal you would like to domesticate and why? My teenage son, Oliver. He's a disgrace.
A chameleon, because it matches the colour scheme of any room.
Sea otter, because they are so cute and they have pockets. Do they?
Sea otters are perverts.
Yeah.
They really are.
Otters are like the dolphins, aren't they? They were a real pin-up and everyone loved them, and then there was a little bit more research and everyone went, ooh, there's a dark side.
Yeah.
Otters, scariest animals I've ever treated.
Really?
Otters. Yeah, otters.
Do they have guns in the pocket?
Oh, just in terms of their aggression.
They are so aggressive, yeah, absolutely wild. Will just go for you.
So what have you got, Brian?
This is a good one, a sloth. So my wife doesn't think I'm the laziest thing in the house.
What have you got, Deborah?
I've got elephant, so I can finally talk about the elephant in the room. Boom.
I have William Barrett writing, I think this is designed to please the scientists. Amoebas, bit selly, I know. Hasn't gone well for William Barrett.
To be fair, David, you didn't sell that one, did you? Jess, have you got another one?
The sea sponge, so I could train it to give me a good scrub down in the bath.
That's
a bit saucy.
Deborah, you got another one?
My children, because I have to live with them. That's from Tim Fleet. I felt I should name them.
Yeah. Ben?
Julia says a phoenix. If Dumbledore had one, then it's good enough for us. Plus, it would create some interesting new Darwin Awards.
Ooh. I've got protozoa, so when I go to work I can say, adios, amoebas.
I've got an elk, because I broke the hat stand.
There's a lot of people with teenage children here. There's another one. Our son, then we wouldn't need hazmat kit for his bedroom. Have you got any more?
An ant, because it would help with fiddly tasks that my fingers are too fat for.
Here we go. Here is the trad one. We always get one of these, and I'm always pleased to find the different ways you've worked it in. From Michael, scorpions, because stings can only get better.
Thank you very much to our panel, Jess French, Ben Garrett, David Baddiel and Deborah Meaden.
Next week is very exciting because our show is going to be Brian's school reunion. Well, not so much a school reunion, it's going to be your kind of particle physics conference, which is even more exciting for you because the Infinite Monkey Cage is going to go back to where it all began, in search of the infinitely small at CERN in Geneva, home of the Large Hadron Collider. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.
In the infinite monkey cage. Now nice again.
Hello, I'm Brian Cox.
I'm Robin Ince, and welcome to the Infinite Lepidopteranaeum, or at the very least, the very, very, very big butterfly house.
Lepidopteranaeum.
That's why I should have said very, very big butterfly house. To be fair, you can pick me up on that, but you were the one who said there's no way I'm saying that line because I won't be able to pronounce it, and now you've pronounced it in front of me, yet again making fun of the arts with your cold, cold physics mind.
Lepidopterium.
Lepidopterarium.
Lepidopterarium.
Let's go to our guests who have not yet been introduced, so we'll be phantasms. Lepidopterarium? Lepidopterarium.
I've never used any of those words.
Oh, no. We've got the wrong guests.
Now, regular listeners will know that in our unashamed quest for a larger audience, every so often we pitch two animals against each other in the title of the show before delving immediately into scientific detail and thus fatally undermining the populist conceit.
So we start off by trying to be like WCW, then we become an open university. So it's the equivalent of starting off with the idea of an illegal East End lock-up dogfight, but then actually it turns out that it's just a battle between which dog salivates first when Brian rings his little bell. And he does like to ring his little bell.
kind of like Pavlov's dog fight.
It's
isn't it?
Pavlov's
It's
dog fight, exactly. So far we've pitched bats versus flies, we've had dogs versus cats, wasps versus bees, which ended up pretty much being for the wasp, which was quite a surprise there, but it was a great argument. Tonight is a whole new cocoon of worms, because we are asking which is better, moths or butterflies?
Wow.
Thank you.
Is it, just because this is Radio 4, is it which is better or which are better? It sounds wrong.
Which
though.
are?
Is it which are better, isn't it?
Which are better? Moths and butterflies, which are?
They're plural.
Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we change the subject then? We say, now on Radio 4, we ask the question, which is better, is or are? Presented by Stephen Fry.
Anyway, today we are exploring those most ubiquitous Lepidoptera. What is the difference between moths and butterflies? How do they fit into the tree of life? And what really is metamorphosis?
And who is the hungriest caterpillar of all? To feud over the fritillaries and tiger moths, we are joined by a lepidopterist, an entomologist, and an expert on watermelons. I believe that's what she is. And they are...
I'm Chris Jiggins, Professor of Evolutionary Biology at the University of Cambridge, and I've spent most of my career chasing butterflies around the jungles of South America to study their evolution and their fantastic colour patterns and how different species evolve to look similar to fool their predators. So my favourite butterfly myth is that the Aztecs believed that the monarch butterflies were the souls of their dead warriors who were coming back to visit the living.
And I'm Jane Hill, Professor of Ecology at the University of York. And my research is focused on both butterflies and moths, understanding how they respond to climate change. And my favourite story about a moth involves someone called Bernard Kettlewell, who was an entomologist in the 1950s. At the time, people were very interested in migration. They knew that moths turned up in the UK, but they didn't know whether they came in one big flight from further south or whether they came in a number of jumps, if breeding and flying and breeding and flying. So he was interested in this, and he used the opportunity of the French atomic bomb test in the Sahara in the 1950s, and then started collecting moths the following spring and testing them with his Geiger counter, and came across a moth that did have radioactive particle in it. And to cut a long story short, worked out that that's where it had come from. So he concluded that this was a moth that had come all the way from the Sahara in one go. And of course, now we have lots of other ways of looking at moth migration. We know something about the amazing journeys that they go on.
I'm Katie Brand. I'm a writer. Sometimes I'm a comedian, but not often. But my favourite story about butterflies currently is I have a tattoo of a butterfly on the inside of my right arm that I got for my 30th birthday. And I also have a tattoo of an anchor on the inside of my left wrist that I got a couple of years later. A couple of years after I got the anchor, I was interviewing a pop star for a TV show. And he leant over to me and he went, "Oh, your tattoos, butterfly and an anchor, what do they mean?" And I was about to tell him, and he answered for me and he said, "Is it freedom and stability and the need for balance?" And I said, yes. That's exactly what it is. And so ever since then, I've been able to smugly tell people that's what my tattoos mean. So that's my favourite butterfly.
And this is our panel.
As is traditional in something versus something, we have a vote at the start and a vote at the end. Could you raise your hands if you are for moths?
Or you could do a sound which would be more effective for the radio.
Can I just say, I really love the way they turned on all the electric lights for the moths to put their hands.
Robin is, of course, correct. It would be better. But what sound?
Well, I'll tell you what. If you make a sound as you imagine a moth might make. Yes, this will be interesting. This might lose a few. So, who is for the moth?
Someone's for the cow over there.
And now for the butterfly. Well, I think it's currently the cow moth. So I reckon, would the audience agree that currently the butterfly is in the lead? Yes. Well, it could all change, Brian.
Yeah, so Jane, your job is to make the case for the moth.
It's a really hard thing to do. I work on both butterflies and moths, but I'll step up to the plate and put forward the argument about why moths are just absolutely fabulous. And I guess at the end of the day, well, butterflies are just moths that happen to fly during the day. So we could say that this is a sort of pointless comparison. Because
Jane, to be quite honest, we should have done the research call with you before the listing was put in the Radio Times. Because it was only once it had all been confirmed that we were told, you do know that butterflies are just moths. So just accept that throughout, everyone's a winner today.
Just welcome to the world of light entertainment, Professor.
But there's about 180,000 Lepidoptera, and about 90% of those are moths. So just on numbers alone, we should all be saying moths are just absolutely fabulous. The other thing about them is I think people think that they're drab and brown, but they're so colourful. If anybody's ever run a moth trap, there's just an amazing colour of them. And I love the names of them as well. Much more mystical than perhaps some of the butterfly names. So you have a merveille du jour, the wonder of the day, or the burnished brass, or one of the ones I quite like is the old lady. And also Mother Shipton, coming from Yorkshire, it has the image of rather charmingly what is called an old hag on the wings. And of course, Mother Shipton's cave in Knaresborough was where she lived. We've talked already about lights and about moths coming to light. And one of the amazing things is why they're doing that. And that's because they can navigate using the moon and using the stars. And they undergo these amazing migrations where they just fly up several hundred metres above the ground. They select the ideal wind and they just go with the wind, and they're travelling a ground speed of about 50 kilometres an hour heading to their destination. And then the final thing I would say as an ecologist, again, going back to the sort of 1920s and 1930s, there were people working at Rothamsted, which is in St Albans in North London, and they were running moth traps, and they were noticing these really interesting things that got them thinking about really fundamental questions about ecology. So if you run a moth trap, you know that most individuals are just made up of very few species. So this idea of why some species are common and why some species turn up or not, and that led to some really fundamental understanding that we use today about patterns of relative abundance and about patterns of species richness. And that all came about because people were interested in running moth traps and looked at their observations and just came up with these really, really interesting things. So moths are fabulous.
But that Mrs. Shipton is one, old Mother Shipton, is fascinating because I understand, there are some moths you look at and you go, isn't that incredible? It looks like an owl's face, so that will put off the predator. But the idea that you would look like Mrs. Pepperpot is a really, oh no, I can't attack that. It's a small old lady. How did that evolve? So, now, Chris,
I was going to show you my owl butterfly look. So it's actually a myth that they're called owl butterflies, they're caligos, but actually they never sit like that in the wild. They always sit with their wings together, so you never really see the two eyes, actually. So they look like owls when entomologists spread them out and stick them in a drawer.
Which means they've lost the battle of the predator already, doesn't it?
Kind of missed the moment, really, haven't they? Yeah, but actually in the wild they always sit with their wings closed like that, and you can't see the two eyes.
So at no point would that have been any use whatsoever, really?
Well, I think there is something, these eye spots come up again and again in butterflies, and I think there's something quite striking about just suddenly seeing this eye when a peacock butterfly, for example, has its eyes on the upper side and it flashes that pattern and you see those eyes appear. But these have got the eyes on the underside, and so you don't really see them together like that. But maybe it's still a bit of shocking to a predator to see that big thing, flashing shocking. Eyes. Yeah.
But Chris, so your job, you have a minute or so to make the case for butterflies.
So they are all the Lepidoptera, that's true. And the butterflies are a small group within the Lepidoptera. And Lepidoptera means scaled wings. But, I mean, look what the butterflies have done with their scaled wings. They're amazingly beautiful. This is a morpho butterfly, which I'm holding up here. It's got this iridescent blue colour, which you can just, in the sun of the rainforest in South America, you can see them from kilometres away. So they're remarkably diverse in their colours and patterns and shapes of their wings. And it's really because they've evolved to live during the day, so they've evolved to a visual world. So I think that's why we can relate to them, because they see in the same mode that we do. And they actually have amazing vision. So we have 3 photoreceptors, which gives us our color vision. Some butterflies have up to 15 photoreceptors, even multiple photoreceptors that are sensitive in the ultraviolet light. So that means there are whole wavelengths that they can detect colors and shapes and sizes and things that we can't even see, which I think is extraordinary. And that's all evolved for them to signal to each other and for the males to find females. So they're very visual organisms. I think that's why we as humans can relate to them. So they've taken what moths do and just taken it to another level.
Is that the primary difference? Is it just night, day, essentially?
That's not a very satisfactory definition, because there are some moths that fly during the day. And actually, these owl butterflies that I was showing are dusk flying, so they're not quite night flying, but they fly when it's getting dark. So it's not a clear-cut definition. But taxonomically, there is a group of the Lepidoptera that's nested within the bigger Lepidoptera that we call butterflies.
To an expert, what is the difference? How do you decide? If you see a specimen you've never seen before, for example,
well, they have clubbed antennae. Butterflies have clubbed antennae, whereas moths generally have just sort of pointy or fluffy antennae. So that's maybe one of the defining features. But yeah, essentially, as we were saying before, you just kind of know, those are moths and those are butterflies. It's hard to pin down a single defining feature for the group, basically because evolutionarily, butterflies are nested within the moths, right? So they're not kind of completely distinct groups.
I love that scientific. It never sounds that scientific, doesn't the definition of, well, you'll know it when you see it.
Well, most of the definitions are they generally do this. So butterflies generally fly during the day, and moths generally fly at night, except for when they don't. And then, as Chris says, they have different antennae. And then, of course, moths have their pupa surrounded by silk, which is where silkworms and silk comes from, and butterflies generally don't. And then they have different posture. So you'll see when a butterfly comes to rest, it puts its wings behind it, whereas a moth has its wings flat, generally. and yeah, moths are generally hairier.
Yeah.
But
you said about their eyes being sensitive to different wavelengths.
Yep.
So does that mean that the beautiful colours that we see are only part of the pattern to another butterfly?
Yeah, no, that's right.
It's more magnificent.
Some of them have UV patterns, which we just can't see. Some of the yellows and the whites, for example, just will look plain yellow or plain white to us, but actually they have detailed and rather intricate patterns in the UV that we can't see at all. Yeah, that's right.
So, Katie, you are the arbitrator today. So, at this early stage, and also because your tattoo, because it's all filled in, you could also pretend it's a moth. So it won't change. It won't mean you have to have laser surgery.
Okay.
So, at the current stage, where do you sit in terms of butterflies versus moths, taking into account the fact that that's actually a false division?
Right. Well, I don't know. I guess I'm leaning currently towards butterflies, but that's because that's what I walked into the room with, right? So I'm very much open to being persuaded. I also have a guilty conscience about moths because I went through a short but quite intense phase of cutting up dead moths when I was about 11. They were dead already, can I just say, right? And I would collect them, and then later on with a kitchen knife, I would try to dissect them. But usually what happened is that it would just disintegrate into kind of moth-coloured dust. So I guess I sort of harbour some guilt, maybe possibly a bit of resentment about that early on, because I never cut up a butterfly, so I never found a dead butterfly. I'm aware also, though, I'm quite seduced by the sort of mythical, spiritual aspects of moths. We're all now, I don't know, doing lots of spiritual things and stepping into your empowerment and, leaving a glass of rose water by a full moon so that you can snog the boy you fancy. Stuff like that.
You're really taking this away from the science.
Yes, no, sure. I am.
Brian's twitching a lot.
Yes, I get it. But I think these things are important, in terms of our emotional engagement with moths and butterflies. So I'm a bit attracted by that side of the mothness. So we've got all to play for, is what I'm saying. I do have a question about butterflies and moths. It's about the nature of consciousness. And I heard on the radio someone talking about butterflies and talking about the way, sorry about the terminology, correct me please, does a butterfly have a cocoon or a...
Well, chrysalis, cocoon, pupa, they're all words for
so
the
the
same
caterpillar
thing,
turns entirely to pulp inside mush,
kind of,
and then reforms itself as a butterfly or moth, is that sort of it?
I think there are still structures there.
There are still structures.
But what I heard on this radio thing before you leap in with all the expert analysis, right, which I am anxious for, but the question is, experiments have been done where certain stimuli have been presented to a caterpillar, to maybe bright lights or loud noises or whatever it does, whatever caterpillars don't like. I'm sorry, I'm unsure. And it had reacted to that stimuli as a caterpillar. And then post pulp and reforming as a butterfly, they showed the same creature, the same individual creature, the same stimuli, and it reacted the same as the caterpillar had. And the suggestion in this piece was that the consciousness of the caterpillar had somehow survived the pulpiness, the total goo, and when it had reformed as a new creature, the awareness of something that had happened to it as a caterpillar in terms of its consciousness was still intact. And I don't really know what my question is, other than, is that true?
Yeah, there are structures, the adult structures already there in the caterpillar. So I'm not sure about consciousness, but certainly, for example, the wings are little balls of cells. And if you're so minded, if you snip in the right place in the caterpillar, you can pop out this little ball of cells, which is going to be the wing of the adult butterfly. So it's not true that they all dissolve completely into pulp. They're already forming the adult structures in the caterpillar. But they do then dissolve all those caterpillar structures that they don't need anymore and reuse those nutrients to build those adult structures within the pupa. So it is the most extraordinary transition. It's ecologically extraordinary. They just live in completely different environments and do completely different things.
Because I didn't realise this either, I don't think Kate did, which is we'd kind of been taught that he'd become entirely liquefied, and that and what you're actually saying is that whatever we want to call the consciousness, the nerve endings, whatever, that actually, if you found a caterpillar in a cocoon and you cut it open with your 11-year-old scissors and all that kind of stuff, you would be able to monitor certain features that had not been liquefied.
That's right, yes. That's
okay.
Right, yeah.
Well, thanks for dashing that mystery.
Explaining it.
Explaining it. No, I thank you for that. I've been interested in that for a while.
From an evolutionary perspective, butterflies and moths are insects. So could you just outline the evolutionary history of Lepidoptera?
Well, they're related to things like mayflies and caddisflies, which are also obviously what are called holometabolous insects, which go through a pupation stage. How old are the Lepidoptera?
So I would say about 300 million years.
300 million years ago.
Yeah,
the butterflies originated sort of just over 100 million years ago.
Oh, so they're quite ancient organisms. I mean, that's a long 300
The diversification of the butterflies roughly coincides with the diversification of the flowering plants, the angiosperms. And their diversification is closely tied to the plants that they eat, because really the thing that defines them ecologically is the plants that the caterpillars eat. That's what diversifies them. And so they're tied to this diversification of plants.
Perhaps we could explore that a bit. They essentially co-evolve the story.
There's this constant sort of evolutionary arms race between the plants and the caterpillars. The plants are evolving these toxins and other defenses. And so, for example, we study these butterflies, which the reason they're brightly coloured is because they have cyanogenic compounds, the little sugar molecules that release cyanide when they get attacked. They get those molecules, they can either make them themselves or they get them from the plants that they feed on. So the plants have evolved an enormous chemical diversity of these cyanogenic compounds, trying to evolve new compounds that the butterflies can't sort of deal with. And then the butterflies, some species evolved to deal with it. And then they also use, there's one species of Passiflora which has hooked trichomes, little hooked hairs. And it's just like Velcro, actually. You stick the leaves to your shirt and they stick like Velcro. And most of the caterpillars just they're pretty gruesome. They get kind of caught up in these hooks and they sort of pulls their cuticle open and they start bleeding and they die very quickly. They can't survive at all. But there's a couple of species that have evolved with really thick cuticles and they can sort of stomp around on these hooked trichomes. Work we're doing at the moment where one of the species that can walk on it, but it can't eat it. If it tries to eat it, it dies. But then there's one species that's managed to walk on it and eat it. And it's got really thick kind of cuticle in its gut to deal with these nasty little hooks that get into its stomach.
Because you've got a caterpillar and then the butterfly or the moth, then ultimately I suppose they become pollinators.
Right.
And they're then happy.
So the same plant might be trying to attract the butterfly at one point in its lifestyle, but they don't really want to attract them too much because, of course, the adults are also laying the eggs that produce the caterpillars. So they have, it's
brutal.
They produce scents and colours to attract the pollinators. But they also, one cool thing they do is the plants produce fake eggs. So you don't want to lay your egg on a plant that already has eggs on it, because the larvae are cannibalistic. So that if you lay your egg where someone else has already laid an egg, you're likely to get eaten by the one that's already there. So the plants make these little structures that look like butterfly eggs to try and sort of deter the other butterflies from coming and laying eggs on them.
This must be a source of immense stress for the butterflies. I like to look in my garden at spring at two little butterflies going together like this in the sky, and I always thought they were kind of dating or courting, or at the talking stage at least, and now I just feel like they're having a massive row about whether that plant's got fake eggs on it or whether you can lay it there.
But that's the thing about nature, isn't it, where you hear all these and watch all these things and go, what a pretty thing doing pretty stuff. It's like when you first find out about what the dawn chorus is really saying, you go, oh, it's rather a rough night in Newcastle.
Sorry, what's the dawn chorus?
I'm not
really
going to tell you
saying?
about the dawn chorus, but frankly, those birds are not as innocent as you might imagine.
Right.
I think my friend Nick Rebel used to basically translate the dawn chorus as, do you want some?
Do specific butterflies pollinate specific plants? Is it very, very tightly adapted?
That's sometimes true, yes. It's very true of the caterpillars. So very often the caterpillars can only feed on one species or a couple of species of plants. And that's because of this very tight coevolution of the chemistry of the plants and the ability to deal with that chemistry. So they evolve to be very specialist in the things that the caterpillars eat. And that can also be true of the adults, the pollinators as well.
And if the caterpillars feed on several host plants, they're usually closely related phylogenetically, those host plants. So there's obviously a challenge, as Chris is saying, to break down the defences of the plant. And so once you're specialist on a particular group, you probably can eat other ones as well.
Jane, how can we, because we were talking about the evolution there as well, and I'm just wondering, going back 100 million years, how exact or inexact is our understanding of what butterflies and moths look like? Because I would imagine they are something which, within the record of what is left behind, something like a butterfly or a moth, there's a fragility to it. Thinking about those ones that look like an owl's face, understanding that journey. How much can we know about what the butterfly or the moth of 100 million years ago would have been?
Wouldn't look like an owl, would it? Because there weren't any owls.
Sometimes it can just be a bit of patience, can't it? I'm not coming off this tree until. But that's what I mean. Is it, so there will have been a point, in all of these different changes.
Yeah, so there are some fossil butterflies, but not many, because it's quite hard to preserve something with such a soft body and no bones and so on. I guess we don't have particularly good understanding about that because there is just so little from that time. And the only information we have is what we can infer from sort of genetic information now.
Yeah, evolutionary biologists try to infer it from the present-day species and their relationships, but the patterns evolve so fast, it's actually quite difficult, yeah.
And you mentioned it earlier, but I was going to say, it's difficult to talk about evolution, isn't it? The purpose. Let me use the word.
Don't use that word.
So the patterning itself, the colours, because it is tremendously intricate. So what is the point of that complexity? You mentioned maybe attracting other butterflies. Is there more to it than that?
Well, these guys actually have a lot of mimicry. They're brightly coloured and different species evolve the same patterns. And they're sending a signal to predators that they're bad to eat. So they're actually there's two different kinds of mimicry. There's mimicry where you're pretending to be something nasty, and you're edible, but you're pretending to be something you're not. And then there's kind of a more mutualistic mimicry where you're kind of all joining in to send a common signal. Actually, you're all nasty. So they're evolving the same patterns to send a common signal to predators. But one of the weird things about these butterflies that we study in South America is the pattern that they have in the same species just changes rather randomly every few hundred kilometers. So you go either side of the Andes in Ecuador, the same two species look identical where they live together, but completely different on the other side of the Andes. And I think it's just fashion, right? It doesn't really matter. You just want to look like everyone else. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as it's kind of bright and gaudy and the birds recognise you. So
I'm glad, because that's what I was thinking. I was thinking that kind of moths are like goths and butterflies are the new romantics, right? So, because you're mentioning the mimicry, is that Batesian mimicry? Because I remember watching a thing of Batesian mimicry, very much like what Chris was saying, and to me, it's such a fascinating thing that bit where you go, you don't have to evolve to be poisonous, but to evolve to look like something that's poisonous. And that was the first story I heard, I think, of Bates and the research that
very,
he
very
did.
inspiring. You don't actually have to be nasty. As long as you look nasty,
Yeah.
people will broadly leave you alone.
It's the face I do when I walk past the Scientology Centre.
Right, yeah.
Just to not get given any leaflets.
Not today.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
today.
So is there a suggestion here that somehow that they're cheating?
Well, I suppose nature so often is a cheat, isn't it? That's the thing, which is if you appear to be poisonous, it takes less energy as such than actually being the poisonous creature.
But of course, you have to get the frequency of those right, because otherwise birds or whatever's eating you will start to realise that that's not necessarily a good cue to being poisonous.
Now you're ostentatious and gaudy, and you're edible, and that's not very good.
Really not what we're looking for.
So that is why the new romantics died out. But the goth scene is still very strong. So, yeah.
I was interested to know something, not science, quite so science-based, maybe science adjacent. I can't name any of the books specifically now, but the number of books, that would have a butterfly collector, and it would always sort of signify something about that person's character or a sort of lost youth. Or I'm sort of interested to know from both of you as scientists, where do you think that character archetype comes from?
Well, I suppose what you're really saying is like John Fowles's book, The Collector, is about somebody who collects butterflies and then kidnaps someone and tries to force them to love them. And in Silence of the Lambs, it actually is a serial killer who's obsessed with them. So what we're saying is, are you more likely to kill?
I suppose there is
that roughly a summary of what you mean?
Sort
I'm
of.
sorry.
I had a couple of gentler kind of literary archetypes, but yes, there is also this use of the idea of catching something beautiful and free and pinning it to a board. And maybe that is psychopathic. I don't know. Would you care to comment?
Perhaps I could give an example to sort of counteract that, which is the story of Lady Eleanor Glanville, who's a real person, so we're not talking about stories here. And we have a Glanville fritillary in this country. So historically, she was an avid collector. She was really interested in butterflies. So after she died, her family contested the will because they said she was obviously mad.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I could turn this perhaps into an actual question. Which is,
come on, it's a conversation.
I'm going to do it. What role did collecting butterflies and moths play in our understanding of evolution?
That's not the same question at all. That's a totally different question.
No.
Totally moves us away from whether they're killers.
What I'm actually asking is, do you know what the first evidence or sign of humans mythologizing or spiritualizing butterflies is? Is it involved in cave art? Is there any? Did Neanderthals do this?
The Greek goddess Psyche was the goddess of the soul, and she was always depicted with butterfly wings.
Oh, okay.
But following on from
going
that,
on to the science.
what role did the collection of
Wasn't it
butterflies and moths
Fotherington
play
Thomas?
in our
I think the fact that they're so iconic and people are attracted by them has meant that people have collected them, so we've understood them much better than many other groups.
Yeah.
In the UK, we have amazing records of where butterflies have lived over the centuries, which is some of the best data sets we have for tracking climate change and how the impacts of the changing world on species distributions.
Yeah, so museums contain vast quantities. If you go to the Natural History Museum, you'll see masses of butterflies and moths, all which have been catalogued, all very carefully named, and the location. You have this amazing amount of information going back hundreds of years, telling you where those butterflies and moths were found. And then, of course, you can look to see whether they're still there today and understand which species have disappeared, which ones have arrived, and understand a lot more about the biodiversity, whether it be in the UK or whether it be elsewhere in the world. So although the sort of fashion for collecting and pinning has gone, and actually it's mostly frowned upon. I mean, we've got apps on our phone that we can take photos and identify things. Arguably, we don't have to go out and kill things and put pins.
That's
through
interesting.
them.
So is that a bit taboo now? In your
Absolutely.
world,
So if you go to museums, you'll find that most of the collections stop around the 1980s, something like that.
Was that something you did, like as a community of scientists, just sort of organically decide we don't need to do this anymore? Or?
So I think in many cases there was no need to do it because you can identify things without catching them and killing them. And I think also the fashion has changed in terms of, seeing a whole load of dead things pinned out in a tray is perhaps not the same as going out into the field and seeing them flying around.
But yet it's a resource, a historical record.
Yes, and of course those specimens have genetic information associated with them as well. So now the techniques are possible to extract genetic information from this museum material. Well, that sort of looking back into the past tells us a lot about biodiversity now.
I wanted to ask you quite a specific question, Jane, really. On when I was a little boy, my dad loved doing wildlife photography, and he wanted to try and take photos of every butterfly in the UK. And say, I think it would probably be 1979 or 1980. I remember we went on holiday in Dorset, and I would be walking behind him in these kind of, these fields of hay, and he would have his camera out. And that's how he wanted to pin and mount the butterfly, was to get a photograph of it. And I wonder, what would I have seen then that I would not see now? And what might I see that would not have been there in 1980?
Well, we know that the ranges of butterflies and moths have changed hugely as a consequence of human-caused climate change. Some species are heading northwards in the UK really fast. So I guess which species have arrived and which ones have gone depends on where you are. But where I am in Yorkshire over those 40 years from the sort of 1980s, been quite a lot of species turning up from further south. So things like gatekeepers and speckled woods. So these are residential species. They're not migrants, moving at quite a rate. Roughly speaking, they're moving at about 2 kilometres a year as they're tracking the isotherms as they're moving northwards, which means they're not keeping track of the climate, but something like a comma it's going about 11 kilometres a year, something like that. So you're getting all of these southerly ones moving north as it warms up, and then you have some butterflies, just a few in the UK, that like it cold. You get them in Scotland on mountains, and they're moving up the mountains and disappearing off the tops.
That brings us very nicely onto migration. One of the most remarkable abilities of butterflies and moths, I suppose, is the question, is that the distances they will migrate. You mentioned the monarch butterfly earlier. It's an astonishing migration.
So the monarchs are extraordinary. They go all the way from Canada down south to spend the winter in Mexico. So the same butterfly will fly all the way from Canada down to Mexico to exactly the same woodland where its predecessors spent the winter. After spending a period of cold, and actually you can replicate this by cooling the butterflies down in the lab, they then completely switch their desire, and in the spring when they wake up, they want to fly north. But actually, there's several generations before they get back to Canada. So it might be 5 or 6 generations. So they lay eggs on milkweed, and then the new butterflies come out, and then they fly a bit further north, they lay eggs. So actually, if you think about that whole migration back down to the same bit of woodland, it's not the same butterfly doing that. It's encoded in their DNA somehow, that they can know exactly where to go back.
It's the same valley, isn't it, in Mexico, and then the same woodland in Canada. But multiple generations. It's even more astonishing to me.
I can only assume they've left each other little pamphlets.
Like Hansel and Gretel, they left.
Well, it's kind of like cultural. But is it understood that
how it's encoded? We have no idea. I mean, that's just extraordinary. We know a bit about how they find their direction.
Well, the navigation.
The navigation. Yeah. So they do have a magnetic compass, so they can use a magnetic north-south. But the most important signal is what's called a time-corrected sun compass. So essentially, you know what direction the sun is in, and you know what time of day it is, you can tell which direction's north and south. And they can tell which direction the sun is in even when it's cloudy, because they can detect the polarization of light, so they can know where the sun is. And they detect the time of day using a circadian clock, a bit like we do. You know, we have a sort of inbuilt clock. And of course, you have to entrain your clock on daylight hours, obviously why you get jet lag when your clock is sort of out of sync. And we entrain our clock very sensibly, it seems, by molecules in our eyes which detect the light. Strangely, these monarch butterflies use their antennae. Even though they have eyes, they actually have light detectors in their antennae. That is what they use to entrain their day-night cycle. And if you cover the antennae with little bits of tinfoil, well, it's an obvious experiment.
Do they start believing conspiracy theories?
So I can understand how you can navigate north-south, and magnetic bit, the time-corrected compass, and so on. But the specific location, a particular valley.
But that's probably particularly to do with the monarch. And I'd like to stress that there are many moths that are doing this type of migration, and they're doing it at night at very high altitudes, which is even more impressive. I'm going to argue.
Doing everything a butterfly does, but backwards and in heels.
Exactly. But don't necessarily have to end up at exactly the same location to overwinter. So this idea that it has to be incredibly precise in order for the migrants to persist is perhaps most true in monarch, but not true in other species.
I just want to ask you, because we haven't talked about the moths so much, but you said that they navigate as well, so they're not using the sun because they're flying at night.
So they're using star compass and the moon. But the same principles apply about being able to work out where you are and the direction you're moving in.
I mean, that's a remarkable thought for something, a moth.
And can you imagine how it feels, Katie, when it bashes into your kitchen window?
Yes. Because I do it all the time.
Because it presumably thinks it's got to the moon.
Yes.
And it wasn't expecting that.
And then it sees you with your scissors going, it's that 11-year-old again.
That question, though, we should ask it, because it gets asked an awful lot, doesn't it? Why the moths? The moth and the flame. Why do the moths go to the light?
So they're using the moon and the stars to navigate by, and that then means that when we put artificial light out, it confuses them, and they get attracted to lights at night in people's kitchens and street lamps and so on. And very often they get eaten at that point because bats or whatever will hang out around street lamps and eat them.
Unfortunately, we've just about run out of time, so we have to go back to say, well, because obviously the overwhelming sense was that the butterflies won. I'm now going to claim that the moths, because the moths are astronomers, so, clearly a higher level of being. So can we say,
I do feel that because we've not really in any way talked about butterflies versus moths, we've really found out that butterflies are moths and that they are remarkable.
Yes.
That we kind of have yet again ruined the conceit of a show that started off on such
Can we agree that they're both magnificent things?
What do you think, Katie? You are the arbitrator. Are it moth or are it butterfly?
Well, here.
Or is it moth or is it butterfly?
I started off very much on the side of butterflies with my tattoo, but I've sat and I've listened to all of this, and I have decided that butterflies are moths anyway, and that moths do astronomy is quite remarkable. So I, as the adjudicator, am going to come down on the side of moths.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, we asked our audience a question. If you were going to emerge from a cocoon, what would you like to emerge as?
I've got here Brian's essence.
At the end of this, could I leave first?
No. Whatever bug secretes the silky material they make Brian's hair from.
Right, I'm actually off now. I've got a bee, as things can only get better.
And I've got a cheese because things can only get fetter. So there we are.
I love the idea that you can come back as anything.
Yeah.
Feta cheese.
Yeah.
Thank you to our panel, Professor Jane Hill, Professor Chris Jiggins, and Katie Brand.
Now, if you would like to set up a match between two species, then send in your suggestions. I did actually suggest that we do a show where we do an illegal Cox fight, where we go to the back of an East End pub, possibly the Grey Mare, and Brian Cox fights Brian Cox. But that wasn't allowed for health and safety, so we're going to have an illegal dock fight instead, in which a bare-chested Robert Winston takes on Dr. Pimple Popper. So, come on, Spotty, I'm going to get you. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Now nice again.
Hello, welcome to The Infinite. I did a very special hello, by the way. That was what we call the podcast hello, which means that because slightly younger people often listen to BBC Sounds for their podcast, I go, hello.
Can I just explain who that is? That's Robin Ince. I'm Brian Cox. And you are listening to the BBC Infinite Monkey Cage podcast on BBC Sounds, which you know because presumably you've downloaded it.
Hello, I'm Robin Ince.
And I'm Brian Cox. Today's programme is about intelligence, not human intelligence, as its existence has become far more debatable in recent years.
Due to our ability to use a Black & Decker jigsaw and invent Nutella, we've always believed ourselves to have an intelligence way beyond that of any other creatures on the earth. That, of course, in our ability to, first of all, invent language and then relegate it to a series of emoticons, lol. But have we been looking at intelligence wrongly?
In today's show, we'll look at the cutting-edge research into animal intelligence, in particular the octopus and birds. Is brain size really a good marker of intelligence? And how do we define what intelligence actually is?
Actually, the real reason, I can tell you the real reason we're doing this, is because Brian is one of those omnivores who eats pretty much anything. This is true. Except the only thing he stopped eating is he now won't eat octopus, because he did some scuba diving, met an octopus, had a very kind of flirtatious, tentacly conversation with the octopus, and then decided it was too intelligent for him ever to consider eating. So if you ever wonder, basically, Brian will only eat things that he respects the intelligence of, which places me in a consistent sense of jeopardy. To discuss the intelligence of animals, we are perhaps sadly joined by an entirely hominin panel due to the inability to fit the dolphin tank in here, and the fact that also the raven we had on last time is now asking for more money because it has celebrity status. So enjoy that when you see it in Panto with Bobby Davro. So today's hominin panel are...
I'm Tim Birkhead. I'm Professor of Behaviour and Evolution at the University of Sheffield, and my favourite example of animal intelligence is an experiment with a rook that was presented with the Aesop's fable of, this was a perspex column filled with water halfway up with a floating grub and a pile of stones. And a rook that had never seen this setup before came along and sussed it out and started dropping pebbles in until the water level rose up, and then ate the grub and walked away. The fact that it could do that with no previous experience is just utterly mind-blowing.
I'm Dr. Helen Scales. I'm a marine biologist and writer. Among my books are Spirals in Time, Eye of the Shoal, and most recently a ladybird book about octopuses. And I think the most wonderful example of animal intelligence is the coconut carrying octopus. So it was about 10 years ago, a researcher in Australia called Julian Finn noticed an octopus at the bottom of the sea that had picked up two empty halves of a coconut, and was carrying them around and trotting across the seabed using its legs as arms. And then it got a bit scared and it climbed inside one half of the coconut and then took the other one and sealed itself inside, making a nice shelter. Now, this tells us a couple of really cool things about octopuses and their intelligence. One, that they use tools, and that's one really important sign of intelligence, is the ability to use tools. And this is quite a complex tool. It's in 2 bits. They have to put it together. And 2, the octopus has a sense of foresight. It knew that it maybe didn't need this coconut right now, but at some point in the future, it might need somewhere to hide. So this coconut-carrying creature is an octopus with a plan.
That's like the best version of a Kinder coconut you can imagine, isn't it? That's such a treat.
My name is Danny Wallace. I'm a writer and a presenter, and I have been researching lying for a project recently, and I found out about a gorilla called Coco. And Coco was quite emotional sometimes, and one day she got a bit angry and she wrenched this giant metal sink off the wall and tossed it aside, and everyone heard it, and the keepers ran and they went, "Coco, what's going on?" And now Coco looked and she realised that she might be in a bit of trouble here, and so she did what a lot of us would do, and she decided to lie, and she had a great idea. And she looked through the glass and she saw her, constant companion, All Ball, and pointed at All Ball. And that was a great plan, except All Ball was a very tiny kitten. So it didn't work out.
And this is our panel. I love that gorilla story. There was I don't know if I've told this on the show before, there was a friend of mine, Andrea, who's a zookeeper, when they had a male gorilla at her zoo. It was a new male gorilla, and she was quite worried about the kind of grumpiness of the gorilla, and we were talking about it, and I said, is that a big problem? She said, it is a big problem, but it's not the biggest problem. I said, what's the biggest problem? She said, every time we clean out his bedding, we find new nuts and bolts, and we don't know where they're coming from. And I thought, what? Just the idea of this. Nothing to see here. Beautiful. Tim, let's start off first. I suppose let's start with the definition. When we say intelligence, what do we mean by intelligence?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. Intelligence is really difficult to define. I think probably the best definition is an animal having some kind of foresight, some kind of logics, being able to work something out like the rook and the octopus that we've just talked about. But it's really hard to come up with a hard and fast definition. The problem is that we always set ourselves up as the standard against which to compare everything else. When
you say ourselves, I mean, there are various people you can pick, aren't there?
Yes, I'm generalising.
It's an interesting point, Danny, actually, isn't it? Because if you think about the range of intelligence in humans, it is large, very large. So when you select an animal, let's say a rook, then presumably there's a vast range of abilities.
Fantastic example of that. From ancient Roman times, people kept goldfinches as pets. One of the popular tricks was to train a goldfinch to pull up a little silver chain with a little bucket of water, and the goldfinch would hold it in one foot and then drink the water and then let the chain go down again. And people just loved that trick. And that was used as a model for animal intelligence in the 1940s and 50s. And then in the 1970s, a couple of German scientists did a really cool experiment. They took some nestling goldfinches that had never seen this trick before and hand-raised them all in isolation. And then they presented them with the apparatus that would allow them to pull the chain and the bucket up. And a quarter of them just did it like the rook. First thing, just no problem. A quarter of them learnt to do it by watching the first set of goldfinches, and the other half never mastered it, whatever you did to them, however many times they saw it. So that's a really striking example of the variation that exists in kind of cognitive ability in animals.
And do you think the range is in some sense the same by some measure as it is in humans? Are there genius goldfinches or rooks or octopuses?
Well, okay, the bucket and chain example with goldfinches doesn't really allow your genius to shine through. But the most striking example of genius in birds is Alex the parrot, who died 10 or 15 years ago. Irene Pepperberg had that parrot, and it became very famous. You probably all saw it on television at various times. And it could do all sorts of tests. It could discriminate objects of different shapes, different textures, different colours. And she subsequently had lots of other African grey parrots, and they were all duffers by comparison.
Helen, when we talk about animal intelligence, do we mean the same thing as when we talk about human intelligence in terms of the ways of testing it?
Well, no, because I think we couldn't sort of sit down most other animals and give them an IQ test.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean it doing SATs, but I meant, as in what we would consider to be, again, challenges of intelligence. We might change the...
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the reasons why I think some groups of animals are kind of lagging in our understanding of and our appreciation of their intelligence, cognitive abilities, whatever you want to call it, because you do have to come up with specific tests that are relevant to that animal or to that species, so ecologically relevant. So you can't necessarily expect an octopus to do the same experiment or test as a bird or a gorilla or a goby, because they've got different, first of all, different abilities to manipulate objects. Like you can get an octopus to sort of look for things down a maze by giving it objects that it can reach with its arms, because it's got a very flexible body. But the same thing wouldn't be the case for a sea cucumber, for example. Maybe that's a bit extreme. But so you do have to think about what an animal experiences naturally in the wild and use that to sort of think of clever ways even to test that intelligence in a meaningful way.
So does that mean that marine animals, so dolphins, for example, or the octopus, require a different set of tests or a different approach to try and assess their intelligence?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess sometimes we try and apply the same tests, and it's always a little tricky. So one of a classic test to try and figure out if an animal has a sense of self-awareness is the mirror test. And it's a facet of perhaps towards something a bit bigger like consciousness, which is, does an animal have a sense of its own individual identity? And you put a blob on its face, and if it's a gorilla or if it's an elephant, it actually has a limb that it can look in the mirror and go, "Ooh, what's that? I don't usually have that." But a dolphin doesn't. But you can put a spot on the front of a dolphin and it will swim around in front of the mirror, and you think, well, maybe it does. Is it checking itself out, going, oh, that's a bit different and weird? Same with fish, and they've just done this with fish, actually. And these little things called cleaner wrasse, which are, have tiny, tiny brains, and you wouldn't necessarily think have the capacity for sort of this level of intelligence, but there's lots of signs that they do, partly because of the lives that they lead when they have to, they're cleaning parasites off other fish, and they have to be quite clever about it so they don't get eaten. So they have evolved intelligence, and they seem to have possibly passed the mirror test. You put a dot on its head, and at first, basically most fish, if you put a mirror in front of them, they attack it because they think it's another fish. But these ones eventually kind of realise that maybe that's them in the mirror and start checking themselves out and actually rubbing their heads against the bottom of the tank as if it's like a parasite they've got on their face. So maybe so you can see how the mirror test could translate. But lots of other things you do have to be a bit more specific.
Doesn't that illustrate a really important point, that in the past, in the Victorian era, for example, people exaggerated their idea of what intelligence was. They'd see something and they'd read into it. But now we've kind of rejected that, and more scientific approaches allow us to understand that the cleaner rat is actually much cleverer than we ever thought it was before. So there's this business of over-exaggerating intelligence and underestimating it as well, until you do exactly the right kind of test that's appropriate for that animal in that environment.
But is that what they do as well? I mean, you mentioned the birds that learn from each other, and we mentioned dolphins there and gorillas and these things that are part of bigger kind of social groups who you imagine would learn from each other. But octopus, an octopus is quite a lonely, weird figure. Like, how would an octopus kind of become
Why
more
have you
intelligent?
made the octopus? You turned it into a kind of goth octopus there.
Yeah.
Lonely, weird octopus there.
Never trust an octopus, Robin. Never trust an octopus.
Oh, don't. And they eat each other. That's the main thing. Most of the octopus, if you put them together in a tank, you'll only have one after a while.
You just burst the octopus bubble. We liked them up until
We
now.
do. And there's nothing. I mean, they just don't like each other, which is fine. They
I'm
mate.
going to start eating them again. They eat each other.
They mate at arm's length as well, because the males are like, okay, here you go, see ya, and they just stretch out with
So
a long arm and just
they're a dangerous animal,
to each other. But I mean, they do live. There's now 2 places we know of in the wild where they have been found living together, and this is really rare. And we think it's just a sort of weird occurrence. That there are a couple of places in Australia. One's called Octopolis and one's called Octlantis, where there are like these big groups of octopus that live and socialise together, and they are kind of fairly rough with each other. They have fights. There's like a boss one who always is mean to the other, the other
Is this a
octopuses.
sitcom? You are thinking if it was in Scotland, the fact that Octonocti would just be this wonderful.
So they can be social if they have to be, and we think they're in this place because there's lots of food and they all just kind of want to eat this enormous pile of scallops. So they can be social, but generally they're antisocial. And that actually, I mean, is in terms of like octopus intelligence, it is kind of funny to think about this sort of smart little octopus just sitting on its own, not really interacting with its own kind apart from mating and eating.
And playing with coconut shells.
And playing with coconut shells. And in a way, like, I love that we've discovered this place where they live together. And I want to play this forwards by thousands, millions of years and see, like, what's going to happen to these guys? Because it's almost like this is setting the scene for more stuff in the octopus world to evolve, maybe, because they're interacting and they're like, they have maybe language with each other and stuff. So maybe this is the whole beginning of a new branch of the octopus evolution.
I love this kind of solipsistic octopus Morrissey that you've created. I think it's a beautiful vision. But Tim, I think that's interesting where that talk of socialisation, because all of those different ideas of intelligence, and it keeps changing. But that has for a long time been one of those ideas, hasn't it? That creatures that are able to socialise, it must immediately mean that they must have some kind of superior intelligence. And yet here we're talking about what we believe to be a very highly intelligent creature, which has made quite the opposite.
Exactly. The octopus has probably evolved in a completely independent way. But for the rest of the animal kingdom, being social means you have to be smart as well. Simply being monogamous, being paired up for a long time, you have to be pretty smart. You probably have to have a big brain to anticipate what your partner's doing so that you can coordinate incubating the eggs, feeding the chicks and so on. Whereas if you're a promiscuous so-and-so, you just swan around and do your own thing. And you don't have to be particularly smart to do that. There's no human parallels there, of course. And so being highly social like a primate is an extension of being married, basically, and having a single partner. You've got a whole bunch of individuals that you have to recognise, you have to remember where they are in the hierarchy, you have to remember all sorts of experiences that you've had with them. So it's generally recognised that parrots and members of the crow family, magpies, ravens and so on, They're all social, and their smartness is deeply tied up with their complex social life. They also live quite a long time. Parrots can live 50 years. Raven can probably live 50 years. So you've got to remember a lot of stuff. Whereas if you're a guillemot, which is what I study the rest of the time, they have a limited repertoire, and there's more going on in guillemot's brain than you would probably imagine, but they don't come close to parrots and corvids.
So people, quite a few people have a lone African grey parrot, for instance, and so it would be better to actually have them on their own is not good.
Those poor parrots on their own, they are imprinted on their owner. And we looked after one for a friend, and he brought it back from Africa when he was in the army many years ago. And he went on holiday, and this parrot went, I'm so pissed off, and just pulled all its feathers out. And they never grew back. And that was a stress response. So you're absolutely right. Because those birds are traditionally part of a pair, if you lose your partner, it's terrible. So you're right. I think so. Parrots that are kept on their own, unless their owner spends a lot of time with them, probably have a desperate life. Exactly the same thing's true of the bullfinch, which has a very big brain for its body size, is intensely monogamous, and they also pine for their partners, and if you watch them in your garden, they're often going around as pairs. One of the really interesting things about bullfinch intelligence is that in the past, people trained them to whistle 2 or 3 different German folk tunes, and I think what was happening is that they were co-opting those bits of its brain that would normally be used for keeping the pair bond intact and anticipating what its partner's going to do, to enable them to do all this amazing mimicry.
I think also, I think there's a law in Switzerland that makes it illegal for you to own 1 guinea pig. You have to own 2 because they see it as cruelty otherwise. But they wouldn't learn German folk, they'd learn yodeling, I think. But that's genuinely a thing, I think.
Danny, you did a lot of research into chimpanzees. It's your area of expertise. And I wanted to ask you, because when you made the documentary for Horizon, part of what Brian was talking about, when he met this octopus, this sense of communication, this sense that another creature is understanding you to some. Did you have that experience with the chimpanzees that you met?
I had one magical moment. Growing up, we always want to feel like we have this sense of communication, don't we? That this other little thing kind of understands us. I grew up in a house where my mum's greatest wish was that our cat could speak. And she, it was really, and the problem is my mum is deaf in one ear, and so sometimes she finds it hard to place sound. And once getting back from the shops when I was a kid, she went, "Hello, Sammy," and I went, "Hello, Mrs. Wallace." and rather than sort of come to the normal conclusion, she span around and looked me in the eye and just went, "Did you hear that?" And that is our hope. So making this documentary, I was hoping that something like that would happen. And I went to Des Moines, Iowa, and I met a bonobo called Kanzi. And Kanzi was behind the glass, and they sort of warned me he was a bit of a tricky character. And to my left was a big screen, and on it were all the words that Kanzi had learned. And I could press the word, and then the voice would come out, and Kanzi hopefully might respond. So, if you wanted to say food, Kanzi would know. But as I sort of played with it, I thought, well, I'm going to try and actually have a chat with Kanzi, or like agree on something in some little way. And I'd seen Kanzi running around, so I wrote, "Kanzi like chase?" ? And there was a moment there where Kanzi was like, "Oh, hang on, well, I got that," and nodded. And so I stood up, and the camera didn't quite know what to do because we didn't know this was going to happen. And I asked the keeper, I said, "Should I go?" And they went, "Yeah." And so I went round the back, and we chased each other. And it was the most amazing thing. It was like looking into the eye. It was like making a phone call to an ancestor and agreeing on plans and then doing those plans. And I was quite affected by it.
But that understanding of languages, because Tim, you were talking about this beforehand, about there's a lovely Gary Larson cartoon where you have an owner telling a dog off, and he's going, "Fido, you have been very naughty. I cannot believe that you've done this, Fido." And then you see what the dog hears, which is just blah, 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 Fido, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Now, you were actually telling me beforehand that, for instance, language, the understanding in dogs, you were telling me of an example which goes far deeper than that.
Well, there's that famous border collie, you've probably seen it on television, where the TV camera's in the owner's front room, and there's a pile of, I think it's 1,000 soft toys, and the owner's sitting there in his chair. He goes, "Hey, Chuck, go and get Yellow Monkey." And the dog just runs into this pile of toys, scurries around, brings out the Yellow Monkey. "Go and bring Red Lion," and the dog does the same, and it could remember 1,000 different items and recognise them and find them. It's just, that is extraordinary. And I suspect that that's an Einstein sheepdog as well.
Because that is, I mean, beforehand, one of my favourite things that's happened in this room before is big academic arguments between the scientists. We had pretty much a stand-up row as whether life was going to first be found on Mars or on Enceladus, and had to be calmed down. Now, beforehand, the nearest we got to that in the green room was talking about marine animals, and you then said, Tim, that, well, a dolphin's only as clever as a dog, really. And there was a nice little... So, Helen, what's your... Because dolphins are the pin-ups, aren't they? Dolphins really are, in terms of animal intelligence, especially in the 60s and 70s, John C. Lilly's work, etc. So, do you think it's fair to say, dolphins and dachshunds?
See, I don't know enough about what wild dogs get up to. Because I think with dolphins there's two things, and with all the cetaceans that have these big brains and that seem to have remarkable, complex social lives, we've touched on that already, but the idea that these are groups of animals that live in groups, they have to remember stuff, they have to interact with each other, so there's a good reason for signs of intelligence in that way. And so we have captive studies of dolphins, and those are the ones that go back and we get them to mimic our body movements, perhaps even our language. I don't know that they've really got the same understanding as a bonobo. But actually, I think what's more interesting is what they get up to in the wild, and some of the stuff that they do when they're out there swimming around in their pods and so on. That there's signature whistles that they have names for themselves. But sure, dogs have names, right? They recognise their names. So maybe there actually are more parallels. And maybe saying that dolphins are as intelligent as dogs isn't such a bad thing. They're both pretty smart.
Yeah, they're both smart. My point of saying that was really to illustrate how difficult it is to judge. So, dogs do an amazing array of things. And we tend to think of dolphins and other cetaceans as being super smart, partly because they're mysterious, they're underwater, we can't really see them very easily, and there is this whole mythology has grown up around them. And if your starting point is, okay, they're no different from dogs, then the challenge to the academic is to prove otherwise. By spending time with animals, that's what gives you the greatest insight. And that's what Konrad Lorenz did in the 1940s. Nico Tinbergen, Lorenz and Tinbergen, together with somebody else, won the Nobel Prize for starting the study of animal behaviour. And Tinbergen was a field man. He was outside watching birds through binoculars, rather distant. Lorenz kept his animals in captivity and developed this really close affinity with them and much, much greater insight. So Tinbergen saw things in a very broad species kind of way, whereas Lorenz just knew them as individuals. And both approaches are completely valid, but I think that close proximity gives you that extra insight into what makes animals tick.
Is it partly so that proximity, you spend time with them, as Danny spoke about, and you get to know the capabilities of the animal. But as you said, Helen, that there's also an element of perhaps the mimicking our behaviour. And so is there a sense in which it's easier to ascribe intelligence to something like a chimpanzee or a dog than something that's rather alien, and we really find it more difficult to make a connection, like an octopus, we find it more difficult to make a connection because we don't really recognise its behaviour. It can't mimic us in the way that something with a face like a chimpanzee or a dog can.
Yeah, I think there's a few things going on there. Like you say, that if we can sort of reach across that divide between our species and another in some recognisable way, then we're much more likely to sort of find a quicker way of gauging its intelligence. And I think another thing is, I think, and we're still suffering from this, which is the assumption that there isn't that intelligence there. And I think the creatures of the ocean are particularly prone to this, especially things like fish and octopus too. I mean, they're silent, they don't make sounds, they haven't got facial expressions. So how can we even sort of assume that they don't do things, that they don't have emotions, they don't have this sort of intelligence, because it is that much more of a divide between them and us. And so we do need to break through that barrier of just assumption, and I think it still lingers a lot.
By devising clever tests, and it's much more difficult to devise those tests for something like an octopus. Just coming back to your point about your bonobos, I was once in Africa, and a troop of baboons came into the campsite, and the tent next to us, it was an oldish chap with his secretary, probably his wife, I don't know, and they'd gone for a drive and left their tent unzipped, so to speak. And these baboons had gone in and just kind of ripped open these metal containers, were sitting there eating cashew nuts and drinking whiskey. And my brother was in the vehicle with me, and he pushed me out. He said, "You go and chase them off, and I'll go back and make sure they're not in our tent." Right, and I went up to these baboons, and I chased the little ones off, but these male baboons just stood there and looked at me, and I thought, this is it, I'm going to die. And it was that looking in their eyes when you realise they are so close to us. I mean, this was like meeting a group of thugs on the corner of the road.
I don't know if you've ever been to a Wetherspoons.
Just to bring these threads together, so the octopus and the intelligence in mammals and birds and so on, these are very different evolutionary lines, aren't they? The octopus, the common ancestor between us and an octopus is 600 million years ago or something like that.
I mean,
when there was no, that thing wasn't intelligent, whatever that common ancestor was.
We can carefully assume that, yeah.
Is that important that we've got two pretty separate lines of evolution of what we might call intelligence?
It's crucial, I think, and I think it's what makes the octopus and some of their friends and the other cephalopods in the same group of mollusks. Cuttlefish and squid are also pretty brainy. That's what makes it so fascinating. That's what makes it so important, beyond the kind of how wonderful octopuses are, and I've had moments with octopus and I can't eat them either. Beyond that is this idea that they are out there on their own, 600 million years more likely, all on their own, and they've done it themselves again, in a way that we can sort of relate to, but sort of not. It's a bit strange and different. The way they even just arrange the nerves in their bodies is different to ours. We've basically got a massive brain and some nerves that kind of control the rest of our bodies. But over half, if not 2/3 of an octopus's nerve cells, neurons, are in its arms. So they are doing things very differently to us. It's almost like they've got more of this dispersed network of sensors and responses and processing power. So completely different to ours. And that is showing us something incredibly powerful. I mean, as often people sort of say things like, octopuses are aliens, they're here on Earth. And there's even a fairly sensible scientific paper that came out recently, more of a thought experiment, saying, well, could they be aliens? Maybe they did come down as eggs on an icy comet, or a virus from squid that live on another planet. Most of the people who know anything about squid and octopuses kind of just ruled that all out.
All of the people who know anything.
All of them.
But it is an alien intelligence in a sense, isn't it? Because it's separate.
It is separate. So I think in that sense it's as if we found them on another planet. We may as well have. And I think as well, the other thing it raises is the possibility that we could find intelligent life on another planet. It's happened here twice, at least, we know, and possibly more. I mean, it could be that intelligence has evolved more within the mammals and within the vertebrates, for example. But we know for sure, definitely twice here. So why not elsewhere too?
But you were talking about community and socialising and stuff. I was wondering about humour, because there is sort of evidence for apes finding stuff funny, and you like to think that maybe a dog will find something funny. Could an octopus ever find anything funny? And if so, what?
I think they do, and I think they actually. I think they.
What is it, like puns or?
Slapstick mostly.
Slapstick's great. I mean, the fact you've got 8 choices for the slap is pretty impressive.
Well, there is the lovely story of. Maybe it's not a sense of humour, but a sense of mind, possibly. This story, which I love particularly with octopuses, is so there's a lady who keeps a whole bunch of them in captivity. She's doing various studies, and she's doing the kind of daily feed. And there's a bunch of different octopuses, all in their glass cases. And an octopus actually prefer live crab to eat if they get the choice. That's their food of preference. But they can be weaned onto frozen shrimp, and so they'll take that if they have to. But there's this one particular octopus. And she went down, she gave all the octopuses their squid, and she walked back down the line, and this one had stopped, and it was holding its bit of shrimp. And as she walked past, it swam at the same speed, looking at her, eye to eye, holding this piece of shrimp. And with the gaze still engaged, it shoves that shrimp down the kind of outflow pipe of its tank. It's like, I'm not eating this.
Yeah.
Like this, no.
Wow.
So
I've seen Brian like that in restaurants. It's quite common, yeah.
So what was the most intelligent behaviour, or some of the most intelligent behaviour you've seen in birds? You've described a couple of examples.
Oh, gosh. Okay, look, well, so years ago we did an experiment with chickens, and most of my research has been on a topic called sperm competition, which is females mating...
It's on Channel 5.
Yeah. Females mating with more than one male. And we were interested in how much sperm males had to spare. So we did this experiment where we presented hens to a cockerel. And if you do that and you put the hen in front of the cockerel and he mates with her, and then you put it behind your back and then put her back, he'll mate with her again, and he'll do that all afternoon. But we devised a system where we could... So human. Anyway, we devised a system where we could count the number of sperm that were being transferred from the male to the female. I won't go into details. And if you did that, the number of sperm in successive matings goes down, down, down. So we did this trick on these cockerels, and instead of bringing the same female out, we brought a different female out, and the sperm numbers shot up, so to speak. And what we realised was going on, before every mating, the cockerel would just, oh, it's you. And then the sperm numbers would go down. But if it was somebody new, it's called the Coolidge effect, he would put in a whole new bunch of sperm. So his intelligence was in terms of recognising the female, having some kind of strategy in his head about how many sperm he's going to transfer, and realising that the male, almost unbeknown to us, was kind of sussing out who the female was, just to check. I just thought that was a remarkable bit of behaviour, because chickens aren't renowned for being super smart.
It is. It's not the kind of intelligence you described earlier, the problem solving in a problem you've never been presented with before.
Well, I don't think they'd been presented with this particular experiment before. They were thrilled.
Danny, I'm interested. The idea of, again, of testing animal intelligence, I wonder sometimes whether it also comes from the fact that we're still seeking to make sure that we're superior. Because the idea, for instance, we all, humans were defined as being, we use tools, not like, so does that bird over there, and so does that ape over there, and so then we change it, and then it becomes something about social, and then it goes, it turns out so do they, maybe it's because we grieve. Is there something about also the desire for human superiority that maybe within these tests we're going, we've got to find something that just makes us different to everything else, and actually we're having a problem with that?
Well, maybe. I don't know how we'd feel if we found out that, a chaffinch was 3 times smarter than we were. I think we might have trouble with that. I now
want to bring out a bucket and some water and see if you can do that test.
Or some hens.
Yeah, exactly.
Infinite monkey cage, late and blue.
Let me at them. Go get them. No, I do. Maybe I think I quite like it if an animal gets one over on me. It's quite a great thing to get outsmarted by a cat. I think that's something good. I remember having to actually for that chimp documentary. I remember having to we had a little publicity photo taken, and they brought this. I met this lovely chimp, and we got on. One thing led to another, and the chimp sat behind me and put its hand over my mouth. And it was quite a sort of a weird moment. Obviously, they could rip your head off, but it chose not to. And it was just like this. So we had the picture taken, and it was like I was being silenced by the chimp. And I thought that was great, and I loved the photo. And then I found out what the chimp normally used its left hand for. And that's when I thought, I think that chimp's cleverer than I am.
And this idea of kind of a sense of mind, of others' minds, and their sort of knowledge of what you're doing, and their sort of knowledge of what they think and what they can perceive. And if there's going to be a sort of a tick list of signs of intelligence, I'm sure that sort of thing is one of the important things. One of the problems with really getting to grips with what octopuses are doing with this huge, weird brain of theirs is getting them to actually do the experiments you want them to do, because they're really unruly. They won't do what they're told. They'll just muck about. So it's really actually quite a limitation in terms of getting these sorts of studies done, because like some of them will something simple like training them to recognize a target, and you feed them and they learn to do that, and that's great. And some of them will do that. There'll be like a box of food with a lever, and if they learn how to push the lever, they get some food, fantastic, maybe even some nice live crab, not frozen shrimp. And then there was another octopus who'll just come along and break the lever off, because it's just like, no, don't want to do that. I don't really want the food or whatever. They're quite inconsistent, and they're quite tricky as animals. I mean, I think that maybe it's also telling us partly what's going on in their minds, but they're quite hard to work with.
But you mentioned you'd had a moment with one.
I had an experience with one diving in Florida, actually. We're filming. And so I was diving, it's very shallow water.
Here he is.
it was very shallow water, so it was quite difficult to sort of dive in it, quite tidal. And so I was a bit wobbly and all over the place. And this octopus came out and started mimicking my movements. And so I noticed, so it was standing with two arms, so it was standing on its 6 legs with 2 up like that. And so I'd put an arm forward and it would put an arm forward, and I took it back and it took it back. And so we had this quite a long interaction where I would do something and it would mimic it, and I would do something else and it would mimic, which is absolutely a fascinating interaction. That was my
That's really
point where I
cool.
thought that was actually John Culshaw in a cagoule.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I've only managed to frighten octopuses, actually. I'd love to. The mimicking sounds amazing. That is another thing I've done, is I've managed to frighten one, and they go white when they're frightened. And I saw an octopus in the reef, and I kind of ducked down to it, and every time I did that, it would just go and turn white. And then as soon as I backed off, it went back to being red again. And I did that kind of 5 times.
That is harassment.
You told me, because I love the fact, Brian, most of your stories are very kind of exotic. I was, the Great Barrier Reef diving, but you did also tell me one involving a sewage farm, I think in Uxbridge, and a crow.
Yeah.
So,
you might comment on this too. We were filming it's the Royal Society, and it was some educational films for GCSE science about water treatment actually, and it was near Heathrow, and they had these big sort of treatment ponds with a scraper on it that would move around on like a railway, and they'd scrape off the fat that rose to the surface. So that was the idea. So the fat would rise up and the thing would scrape it off. And they found that it kept breaking. And the reason was that the crows had noticed that if they got rocks and piled them up on the little railway line, they could break the sweeper, and then all the fat would build up and they could eat it. So they'd calculated or understood how to break the apparatus so they could eat.
Well, that's an extension of the Aesop's Brook, isn't it? I mean, that's a fabulous example.
We might all be doing that after October. So, you can cut that out, it's fine. That was more than 48%
the one other animal that I found remarkable, which perhaps goes to the evolution of intelligence, was on Christmas Island, which is just off Indonesia. The top predator is a crab. So they call it the robber crab or the coconut crab. And they're tremendously intelligent. They'll live to a long 70, 80 years. And they told us that they called them robber crabs, I think, locally, because they steal things. They come into people's houses and steal things like a magpie, right? They build things up. And they said, don't leave your camera equipment or bags open, because they'll come. They're huge things, these things. They're as big as a dog, but a crab. Island giganticism, it's called, isn't it? And so
it's literally my worst nightmare.
It was an incredible thing. And so I'd left a bag there, and it went to the bag, and we watched it. It went to the bag and opened it, and I had some money in it, and it took the money out of the bag and wandered off and climbed a tree with the money. So really remarkable behaviour. But these things are the top predator
amazing
on
if
the island.
It turns out that Brian Cox is like Britain's biggest fantasist.
The universe is tiny, it turns out. It's rubbish. I was so hoping when he said the top predator in Christmas Island is elves. I feel really disappointed. We asked the audience a question today as well, and we asked them if one animal was going to take over the world, which should it be and why? Let's find out. Brian, what do you got?
Hedgehog, so we get half the year off while they hibernate.
Spiders, because they could replace the World Wide Web. Danny, you've got some there?
This is, sloths, because then we'd have a good excuse to be lazy. That is true, we'd just copy them. It'd be like, just copying our leaders. And the dung beetle, which is finally fed up dealing with people's, and then a word.
It says Robin here. I thought it's Robin. I suppose you are an animal. But then I think it's Robin the bird. I think.
No, it must be me. It says because they all seem to be intelligent. It must be me. It must be me. Let it be me. Vampire cows, because fangs can only get butter. Well done, Neil.
Very nice.
Thank you very much to our panel, Tim Birkhead, Helen Scales and Danny Wallace. And, next week, I had a premonition about next week's show.
No, you didn't, did you?
Why didn't I have a premonition about next week's show?
Because of the geometry of space-time.
My premonitions included my premonition that you wouldn't believe I had a premonition. But also, while I was asleep, so therefore I couldn't obey the laws of physics, I had this dream, and I saw Brian riding into the studio on a space hopper shaped like Max Planck, and Sigmund Freud was riding on a banana after him, screaming, stop this, it doesn't mean anything at all. And then Herman Rorschach was behind him, leaving inky footprints, all of which looked like my mother. So my premonition was correct, because next week we're looking at the science of dreams. So that's our next week's show. Thank you very much for listening, and bye-bye.
Bye.
infinite monkey cage. Turned out nice again.